like to call this meeting of the State Board of Education to order. Want to welcome everyone. For those of you that have an agenda, we're going to change it up real quick right to start with, and we will have our pledge first, if that's all right with everyone. So if you'd all please stand. And Amy, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Amy, if you go ahead and do our roll call.
Eddie Bowley.
Present.
Scott Crisp.
Present.
Joe Gaspari.
Present.
Taylor Jacobs. RJ Cost.
Present.
Ben Moritz.
Laurel Ballard present for Ben.
Amy Pearson.
Present.
Kristen Schlettman.
Present.
Jen Shin. Fred Van Nuys. Superintendent Dagenfelder.
Proxy.
Ellen Krager.
Present.
Mark Mathern.
Present.
Chairman Lambert.
Present.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thanks, Amy. In front of you, you have an agenda, and as we noted yesterday, it is a retreat, and so it will kind of move, but I would entertain a motion to approve that agenda, even though I've already amended it a little bit, so I apologize for that, but I just thought we needed to change that order before we approved our agenda. So with that, and with that, we'll go back to the 2.1 now after we approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, this is Ellen. I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
This is Joe. I second.
And moved by Ellen, seconded by Joe to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So want to welcome everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed their evening last night. And as I start, I want to thank the Department 2, Wanda and Amy. I know you were involved, and Linda probably too, putting the bags together for us. And so I think we all would share in thanking you guys for that. Appreciate it. So thank you for that. I think we had a good day yesterday. I think Diana has some things she wants to share. And as we start, Diana, if you want to start, and if there is any questions or comments about yesterday, we could make them now or wait until board member comments at the end. If you think it's pertinent for today's discussion, go ahead and bring it up. But otherwise, we'll wait and do that at the end. Go ahead, Diana.
Sounds good. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. So just in the way of a recap from yesterday, I put some thoughts together. Now, the morning, you recapped when you came back from lunch, and I think I got the next steps directions from you there. So I'm going to assume that's all good, and we're set to go with that. That main topic that morning, as you recall, was graduation standards and chapter 31. So then in the afternoon, the two topics, a lot of work done yesterday. The first was state assessment, and the second one was the accountability and the recommendations from Marzano, and then you received Department of Ed recommendations. So in order to recap and clarify your direction to me for next steps, I wanted to share a few thoughts. First, wanted to cycle back a little bit. Dr. Mathern, I know you had asked about the roles, and I kind of jabbered all along, not feeling really comfortable with my footing. So just as a brief follow-up with that, and you do have those roles that are cited in statute as part of that table 2 in the memo. But just in re-looking in that in very general terms, I am comfortable now saying that when you look at those, yes, 21-2-202, duties of state superintendent, you see quite a few citations there around data collection, reporting, and there's an administration of college and career readiness exam. very much in that 202. In 21-203, as shared yesterday, it is the board's area for the implementation of the statewide assessment system. A lot of references to what components will be in that, what they are to look like and what they are to do. And then you are also charged with regularly reviewing that system, evaluating it and reporting to the legislature. Now, on both sides of that column, there's also statutes about how you do that in consultation with districts through the superintendent and pieces. But just, I thought I was mushy in my response. So does that help provide and address your question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for looking into that.
You
Appreciate
bet.
it.
You bet. And then, and I know Catherine, she actually has a presentation later that probably will get into more, possibly of those things. Then your activity was to look at the state assessment components and maybe some options. And really, it really was to get a temperature of the board of what of those areas in that assessment system really is drawing your attention and interest. You had the update from the department and now have the superintendent's plan in front of you. So you prioritize that to look at those pieces within the plan before going on into looking to other areas that you might be of interest. And with that was a related question you had, Dr. Mathern, about a vote, and it was made clear that that wasn't the ask yesterday. It wasn't for you to vote on it. But thinking of that in terms of that going forward, a couple of things that I would share with you as far as what you might want to consider for next steps, and then you can direct me or redirect me, right? One of them would be, and didn't think about it yesterday, but remembering that in February, you had asked that Wyoming Future of Learning Partnership to kind of look at all the systems and how they interrelate, bring recommendations back. I know that work is going on. Dr. Mather and I are on that work. So just remembering you still have that ask of that group. And so whichever direction you go in the coming months, you might want to remember that so that they're kind of informed if your ask changes or if there's a timeline put on that ask, appropriate for them to know that. So that's one of the pieces that you might want to keep in mind. In regard to a question about one, is it even necessary or whatever for you to approve or respond to, the state superintendent's plans and recommendations brought forward. One of the things I was thinking about as I went through this is one of the things you might want to look at is really look carefully if you're approving, what does your approval say? Because some of these, as I review, and this is just very early, very surface level, and you'll certainly want to reach out to the department and your counsel for additional clarification. But some of these, because Mark's question directed me back to the roles, some of these really, I don't know that they're in your lane to approve. So an example might be this additional diagnostic tools for parents and teachers. Clearly in the state boards, or not the state boards, but the state superintendent's lane for responsibilities that deals with the reporting and the educating to the system and all of that. So saying yes to the plan, you're, again, just being clear what you're saying yes to. Yes, we think that's a wise decision, but don't confuse that to your approval is necessary for that to happen. Just my lens again, not an expertise lens or legal lens. But when you go up to another one, like reducing the length of the math assessments, that very much is, falls in the board's lane and is already work moving forward with the reduction of standards. Those blueprints have to be redone. Maybe that one and the one about reformatting the high school math assessments. So saying yes to that, what are you saying? Yes to that approach and the blueprints and you're doing that through the superintendent, move ahead and take it there? Or are you waiting for those blueprints to look at them? You see, you just, I think, would need to be clear on what you're saying yes to, because each take a little bit different level of of your need to be involved in the yes. If there was one that I would, that jumps out at me for the board that I think, in next steps, you may want additional information, is the removal of the third grade writing assessment. Okay, and again, this isn't to say what is right to do or wrong to do. It's about the processes for you and your role. If you look at the writing assessment, you might need to know, I believe if writing is not required in state law or federal law, you're kind of the remaining standing body that would have the authority to put that into the state assessment system. And here's a recommendation to remove that third grade. That becomes a very important decision for you, right? If it is required in state law and federal law, then less so your decision, right? But your next steps to support that would look different, right? As in joining whatever other partners might be going to the legislature seeking that change. So some clarifications about that. So if that is as clear as mud, those would be maybe some next steps in this area. And then, of course, I have your notes as far as other areas in the system that you might want to look at. I'll summarize those and certainly bring those back to you. So the 3 steps there would be keeping your partners that you asked to be involved, informed on where things are going. 2, being very clear about each of the recommendations in the plan. So if you give a blanket approval to the plan, knowing very clearly what you're saying yes to. And then 3rd, circling back to those points of passion or areas of interest that were identified yesterday in your group work.
Thoughts, questions before we move on?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was thinking about the statute we have that both the superintendent and the board shall recommend such legislation regarding education. And I was thinking about the specific ones that require legislative action. It seems like there would be value in us, if indeed we think the recommendations of the superintendent make sense for kids, that, you know, we would carry that water together to the legislature, and we would be there to advocate for that change with the superintendent, as opposed to, you know, feeling like we're sort of abdicating our responsibility and just saying to the superintendent, yeah, go for it. So I know that legislative committees are coming due here in August. And so I wondered about, and maybe Catherine can help with this, I wondered if we should have some kind of commitment to jointly go to the Joint Education Committee to say, well, here's at least 2 of the assessment changes that we think have value, and we need legislative approval for them. And the board is sitting with the superintendent with the ask, as opposed to one or the other. So that was sort of the immediate one in my head. I don't know, Bill, what you think?
I think that makes sense, Mark. I guess, do you have a thought of a process that we would get there? And I see Dickie wants to respond to that too. So go ahead, Dickie, and then I can go further with my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Dr. Mathern, I would echo your thoughts. I think taking the legislative ones and possibly in terms of next steps, the timeline I mentioned yesterday, the August meeting is where we're doing the Future of Learning Partnership together, presenting, and then we would have to have an ask by the latest November if we want to draft legislation. After yesterday, the discussion in particular, I think the 9th and 10th grade situation with math, ELA, and science and how we play that out, I think that we would all benefit from more feedback and stakeholder input on that. And I think that this board would be a good venue to hear that maybe at the next board meeting, so we know what we're doing is right in that regard. So I guess I would just say I echo that, and that maybe we could use this board as an opportunity to get more feedback and fine tune the legislative recommendations we make.
Debbie, go ahead.
You know, I want to talk just briefly about the writing assessment, just because I was thinking about the idea that the 5th grade writing assessment is to write an essay. And then I thought about our conversation we had quite a while ago about the computer program that writes your own essays. And then I also thought about when we were working on the profile and listening to what students were saying, one of the things that I heard several times was they didn't know how to write an email, for example. So there's just so many different kinds of writing besides essays that I wonder really how valuable that assessment is. Or could we do a better job of evaluating students' writings?
Thanks, Debbie. Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would hate to go forward and approve anything without honoring the discussions that happened yesterday. There was a lot of things, and this is speaking to, I think, what Debbie is talking about with the writing and maybe bringing the reading and the writing test together and having it be more of a response. There was just so many ideas shared that I don't know if they've been explored fully, and I, for one, would like more information. I just, the conversations yesterday were really, really exciting. And so to negate those and just move forward with a stamp of approval, I think would be a travesty.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Taylor.
I'm just thinking, Dickie, maybe you can go back. I mean, you guys shared this yesterday, but maybe you can share with us where you got your feedback from, because it sounds like it wasn't like you guys just made this decision in a vacuum. It sounds like you did a lot of collaboration with people. And so maybe just recapping again where you guys got, these data points to discuss.
Mr.
ahead,
Chair,
Vicky.
thank you, Board Member Jacobs. We hosted virtual meetings with numerous associations, both principals associations, curriculum directors. I think we even presented at their meeting in person. Superintendent's Association. Lori, who else do you remember meeting with? Level Up teachers. So tried to get a broad perspective of all the education stakeholders in formulating these.
Mr. Chair.
Mark.
Well, in light of your comment, Amy, I'm wondering about, and Dickie's suggesting that we actually don't need a formal ask until November, that we move this conversation to our next board meeting and continue it and ask the department and Diana to continue to do some more work on kind of our discussions yesterday to see if we could more formally create an ask and kind of separate here's what the legislature needs, what we need from the legislature to move forward, and we help carry that water with superintendent. And then here's maybe some more longer term things that we can continue to look at, or things that don't take legislative action. And it sounds like we might have some more time in light of not needing a formal ask until November.
So Dr. Mather, when you say that, and I'll just throw it out, I mean, do you see, like, say, the admin committee maybe working on this a little bit before our next meeting? Would that make any sense whatsoever? And then we could present to the whole board at the next meeting?
I think the admin committee would be great.
Does that make sense to the board?
Well, I'm not. I'm in peace.
So maybe we need a different committee that you're on. Because we could do that, Taylor. And it's really just, if that would help Diana, especially as our coordinator, put more together for our next meeting, would be what it would be about. It would not be about making any decisions. It would just really trying to help focus the coordinator in the next direction, is my thought. That sound all right with everyone? And then we can bring it back. When is our next meeting, by the way? Does anybody have that in front of them?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning?
I mean, our next board meeting isn't until August, right?
No, September.
Oh, really? Not till September?
July and August.
So,
Am I afraid to suggest,
September
Mr. Chairman, that you might want a meeting dedicated to this issue?
yeah,
I don't think we've decided on the dates.
It's September 19th.
Oh, we haven't.
Oh, we haven't voted on it.
that's right, because I thought of that the other day. Diana and I have not done our homework. We both went on vacation, but she went to Hawaii and I went and chased cows. So. Right, Diana?
Yes.
Okay.
Vacation is every day is what you're saying.
It is. It is. That's absolutely right.
Mr. Chair, even if our meeting is in September, I mean, again, because we have some time, I think we'd be okay, and that would give the admin committee more time to, put some meat on the bone here.
Ellen,
Mr. Chair, I just don't want, if a board member is not on the admin committee, I'm just wondering if we want an ad hoc committee to do this. I mean, I don't want to leave someone like Taylor out. Not that I'm throwing you under the bus, Taylor, but there are several people who are on the board who are not on the admin committee. And so maybe, I don't know what y'all feel like. I mean, the admin committee is a fine place to do this, but if we wanted an ad hoc committee to just study this piece of paper.
go ahead, Diana.
Mr. Chairman, and I hope this isn't appropriate for me to suggest, but I do believe this topic will carry of such interest to the educational community and beyond, that as many of the meetings on this that you have that could happen in the public forum may be appropriate.
So is the board comfortable if leadership and Diana work together and put together maybe a virtual meeting or something before that time frame and just dedicate it to this subject? Would that work? Perfect. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Diana, that we want to recap, or shall we move? Okay. Yes.
Very briefly, I have one suggestion there. Again, looking for your direction. You have the recommendations from Marzano. You have the very thorough response and recommendations from the Department of Ed. I sit here today, I'm prepared to talk to you about the process and where the authority lies and where there's flexibility in statute, what lies in statute, what lies in board authority. So a next step I noted might be to gather that up and have a real firm footing in, again, your lane in all of this, and then proceed from there as far as your reactions to whether you want to move forward with the recommendations. And I don't know from Sean or Wanda, the department, what the time frame they might need a response from you on the recommendations you received yesterday. Maybe it depends on how soon you want them enacted and impacting the accountability system if you were to go that way. Is there a timeline?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Diana, we don't currently have a timeline. I think we would just move forward. If you decide to move this, we'll implement it and work it into the next accountability system.
Okay. Questions, thoughts? Anything else, Diana? Yep, thank you. So I believe we have a public comment deal before we get to Riverside. I don't want to hold you guys up, so apologize for that. I got to quit telling my cow stories. So. Any public here want to make a comment? While I'm sitting here, I wouldn't. It can be staff people too, Wanda. You're smiling, see it. Anybody online? Okay, we're either doing really good or really bad. So with that, Dickie, do you want to introduce Riverside and everyone?
You bet. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you to the board for allowing this opportunity to have Riverside here. The background to this is last year I reached out to a friend of mine in DC who I look to because she's on top of sort of all the K-12 trends. And I said, you know, we're building this profile of a graduate, and I see a lot of other states have done it, some before us, some are behind us. Who's taking that next step in terms of starting to measure the profile of a graduate? And at that time, she made some calls, looked around, and she was like, I don't know if anybody's quite there yet. Some of the assessment companies were talking about it, but nobody had quite gotten to that step yet with the profile. And so earlier this year, she called me and said, I found someone. I said, oh, cool. Let's do a Zoom. Let's talk to him. And so she connected us with Riverside, and Riverside has figured out a way, one way, doesn't have to be this way, but as far as I know, they're perhaps the most advanced in terms of measuring profiles of a graduate, and have contract with the Connecticut State Department of Education, some large urban school districts with their LEA profiles of a graduate. And so I thought it would be good for the board to just kind of hear what they're doing, because they're sort of on the cutting edge of the next step of graduate profiles.
So Dickie, real quick before we start, can you share with the board, because I think you did at an admin meeting or something, of really what your want from the department side is, or the superintendents want out of this presentation. So as we listen, we can really have more in tune to what the want might be.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I personally, and I don't think really anybody in the department has a particular ask of the board at this time, other than to just sort of plant this seed to know that, like, at some point when we continue to mature in our profile process, you know, we still have the consultant taking public feedback, and we've got to take all that in and take our time. So I don't think that there's any sort of time sensitive nature to this discussion. So at least for me, it's just an educational opportunity for the board.
Okay, thanks, Dickie. Pardon me? Yep, green. There we go.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us, Mr. Chairman and the board. My name is Kelly Hayes. I am here with Riverside Insights, and we are honored to have the opportunity to join you this morning. I wanted to share with you my colleagues, Dr. Lisa McCoo, who will be presenting our work with the profile of a graduate, and she will do a deeper introduction of herself before sharing that. I am a former educational leader and have been in the educational assessment and ed tech space for the past 7 years. And my colleague, Philip McCullough, is here. He is the Chief Growth Officer at Riverside Insights and has been a former administrator and has 20 years of serving in educational leadership roles. So we are honored to be here. I wanted to share quickly who Riverside Insights is. Riverside Insights is a longstanding educational service organization. We have been doing measurement and assessment since the late 1850s, dating back to Riverside Publishing. And ever since then, we have been on a dedicated mission to serving students and educators in the evidence-based measurement focused on how we can support student outcomes. And we do that through a variety of different assessments that you may have heard of. We are actually working with many different aspects of the Wyoming educational system today and are honored to be doing that. But we don't want to waste your time on that. We really want to focus today on how we can support your great work in the profile of a graduate. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to share more.
Well, it's actually really exciting to be in Wyoming, and I really appreciate the time that you've given. It's been wonderful meeting everyone. My name, again, is Dr. Lisa McCoo, and I'm the Director of Program Implementation. And I love to tell people that I come by that title very honestly. I've worn many hats in education. I have training as a school psychologist. I've worked in the schools from elementary all the way through high school. And so I've seen that developmental progression of behavioral and social skill building in students. I also got the honor and the privilege of actually leading that work in the 5th largest division in Virginia, all the way from explicit skill building instruction through assessment and really looking at how this all connects with all of our district priorities and initiatives. So really learning how to connect the dots with the things that we are valuing in education. And then I got the honor and privilege of moving over into Riverside Insights. And so I'm really excited to be able to do this work more broadly across the country. So thank you so much for your time today. And it's really, it's amazing just listening to you talk about all the things that are really important. You all are very intimately involved in education and have been for years. So in all honesty, I'm sure it's no mystery to you that our schools are now in a completely new era, right? Graduates now have faced and they will face challenges that we as adults may never have experienced. In the last decade or so, the technology and social media explosion alone have created challenges that we as adults continue to pivot with. So we're at a crossroads. So how we prepared previous graduates for that lifelong learning is not the same as how we have to prepare future graduates. So I want you to take a moment. I want you to think about the skills that students need now to be successful beyond high school. And I want you to imagine equipping the class of 2037. Think about that future student with the foundational skills that they need to navigate starting this year when they're in kindergarten. So according to a study conducted by the U.S. Department of Labor and American Counseling Association, business leaders report that while having basic academic skills are still fundamental to every employee's ability to do the job, employers actually view life-ready skills as the key to the success of young workers in the 21st century workplace. And they specifically identified important skills, such as being able to demonstrate professionalism, a strong work ethic, being able to grow professionally and know where you want to grow and how you want to do that, having excellent oral and written communication skills, having excellent teamwork and collaboration skills, and being able to critically think about situations and being able to problem solve effectively. So interestingly, among other life-ready skills, or what the University of Wyoming calls transferable skills, the University of Wyoming has identified 10 attributes that employers seek on a candidate's resume that actually align with your profile of a graduate. When we think of your students as adults and productive citizens of Wyoming, we want to be able to give them the tools to succeed. So research has also shown that when we effectively foster those life-ready skills in our students, this leads to success academically, socially, and it prepares students for life after high school. This is exactly why these skills are crucial components to your profile of a graduate. And your profile, to me, is a very clear and concise picture of what you value for your students. It's a celebration of what success looks like. These are also skills, coincidentally, that happen to support healthy outcomes, such as being able to effectively manage stress, to engage in healthy social behaviors, to demonstrate more empathy toward others. You are clearly passionate about ensuring that your students not only achieve academic standards, but that they do so in a way that sets a foundation of lifelong success beyond graduation day. You are setting the stage to create the next generation of effective school leaders, educators, and colleagues. What you're missing, though, is a tangible and meaningful way of measuring progress toward that goal. We should be able to apply the same level of rigor for growth in these crucial resiliency skills as you have toward academic growth. And we value the same outcomes for students. So let me show you how we can make that happen. I want you to take a moment look at your screen and see what your students could do if they were secure in these life-ready skills. I want you to picture Wyoming students building these skills from elementary through high school and after. When students have the skills to be life-ready, they're better able to be productive partners with their educators in learning, to be partners in your community in service, to be productive employees in work, and to thrive as healthy and happy citizens of Wyoming. So our flagship tool, the DESA, or the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment, is a psychometrically sound, strengths-based, standardized, norm-reference behavior rating scale of everyday observable positive prosocial skills. As a side note, we've just updated our norms to have the most updated post-pandemic norms starting with our 24-25 school year. It's very exciting for us. The DESA is rooted in resiliency theory, focused on building protective factors as well as those life-ready skills in order to be able to make intentional and reliable decisions for supporting students universally, as well as students who might need more at those advanced, what are called advanced tiers of support. We have an educator-completed universal screener called the DESA Mini, as well as our full assessment, the DESA, available kindergarten through 12th grade. And if so desired, we have a middle school and high school aligned and standardized student self-report, all paired with resources so that we can turn data into effective action for growth. So let me show you what that looks like in alignment with your profile. Take a moment to look through how the DESA aligns with your profile on the screen. And really, one of the most important pieces to this puzzle is this. If we're going to go to such great lengths to define what success looks like, we need to be certain that we're measuring growth on that path to success and are at the ready to support students in building those skills in a very targeted way. Using data-driven recommendations to identify explicit instruction to support students' existing strengths and to build on their opportunities for growth. For students who may need more support, having data to specifically identify scope and sequence programming to build those life-ready skills in students is absolutely essential. So one of the things that you all know this, one of the things we have very little of is time. So we want to make sure that we use strong data that's going to effectively and efficiently identify what next steps we need to take to use our time as wisely as possible. As students get older, again, it's going to be crucial to foster their agency through what I've already talked about, that student self-report, that standardized, norm-referenced, aligned student self-report. And remember, that is also strengths-based. We're looking at building students' positive prosocial skills, those life-ready skills, that students can then practice recognizing where they see their own strengths in real time, in context, and how those strengths support them every day. They need to be able to start to recognize that as they're going through their instructional day. But we also need to allow students the opportunity to engage their agency by allowing them to choose their next steps for growth through specific skill building challenges and through goal setting. So let me show you what that looks like. So in the system, students choose the skill building challenges that align with their growth opportunities. And then they work on those challenges in a manageable format, broken down by task with clear deadlines, allowing them to practice task management and planning. This could be how secondary schools structure advisory time, perhaps having students partner together to support each other in building these skills and celebrating accomplishments. Then allowing students the opportunity to apply their skills in real-world contexts through goal setting, helping students identify how they want to grow and then plan how they're going to access meaningful resources to meet that goal. This is a phenomenal way to help students get ready for the real world. Another piece of this puzzle that we cannot ignore is also to make sure that we provide resources so that our families can partner with their children, with us, and with you along the way. We support you all in that effort by making our efforts as transparent as possible. If you do all these things in combination, research tells us that you will see real results. Using data to drive decision-making, providing targeted support to explicitly build those life-ready skills in students makes a difference. Recently, Johns Hopkins just published a study that showed that if you can identify those skills and if you can show that students are growing in those skills, from the need for instruction range to the typical to the strength range on the DESA, the students will then show the equivalent of 1 year academic growth. And that's what we all want to see. So let me end by painting a picture for you of what this could look like in real terms. So let's start in elementary, maybe with a second grader. Like many kids, this second grader has academic, social, behavioral skills strengths, but she also has areas that really maybe aren't yet strengths. Maybe she easily connects with others socially. She gets really good grades in school. But by the end of second grade, she starts to hit a roadblock in math, especially with math word problems. They're tricky. It doesn't come quite as easily to her maybe as other subjects do. Maybe she starts saying things like, maybe I'm just not good at math. What if her teacher knew to target her curiosity through specific skills to help her learn, such as purposefully asking questions, having her reflect on her thinking? That teacher could then tap into her students' strengths and give her specific strategies to build her confidence, to persevere beyond those challenges. This would be an opportunity maybe to foster a love of STEM in a student, build her self-awareness and decision-making skills. Fast forward to middle school. We all know that in middle school, the focus changes. Students start to really worry about making friends in all their classes, about getting to class on time, turning in work now that they have several classes to manage. So what if as a school, we could build on that elementary profile of a graduate and identify students' skill strengths and areas of growth to target relationship and self-management, or what we may refer to sometimes as those executive functioning skills, in a very targeted way to help students work more productively and successfully navigate this very tumultuous time in their lives, helping them to experience success and build resilience as they ready themselves for their last chapter in their K-12 story. So now imagine your students nearing graduation day. Students have developed awareness of their skill strengths so that they can be productive partners in their own growth and success through agency, choosing where they want to grow and where they want to challenge themselves. Students are hyper-focused on identifying future goals for themselves, learning how to make life-changing decisions, such as going to college, choosing their future career path, getting that first job. Imagine the student who has practiced their skills starting in elementary school, allowing them to thrive, knowing how to solve problems and persevere through setbacks, setting long-term goals for themselves. This is the profile of the graduate in Wyoming. And Riverside's Aperture Education is ready to partner with you to make this profile come to life in every aspect, to help every Wyoming student learn, work, contribute, and thrive. Thank you so much for your time.
Any questions from the board? Dr. Mather?
Thank you. Is it Dr. Miku? Miku?
Yeah.
Thank you. I was looking at the one slide that you had about the Johns Hopkins study.
Yes, sir.
So am I right in thinking that's the study where they enlisted AmeriCorps volunteers to help?
Yes, it was in partnership with City Year. City Year is an organization that works with all manner of urban districts around the country. And so it was about 38,000 student study done between 2021 and 2023. And so that was the context in which Johns Hopkins engaged in the study using the DESA program.
So were they able to tease out the effect of actually having another adult work with kids beside their teacher and the effect of using your materials? It seems to me those are two separate components of the impact.
That's something we should follow up on. I don't think they explicitly call that out in the study. What they have talked about is the different correlations between specific DESA skills that were measured and how those directly informed, the implementation of skill building and what results they saw based on those skill interventions.
And then just one follow-up, Mr. Chair. The other addition that was put into our packet was a document called DESA High School Strategy, Think It Through. And it looks like a lesson plan to me. So I guess my question is, do you see yourselves approaching individual school districts saying, hey, we've got a social emotional curriculum for you to help with the profile? How do you see this? It's not a computer container to capture the skill set when it's mastered. This is really a lesson plan to help cultivate the skill set. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think there's actually quite a bit of flexibility within the implementation process. And so we have districts who might use what you, that the particular lesson that you looked at as part of what they do universally for students, maybe at a dedicated time for elementary, maybe at advisory time for middle high school. They also might use our supports as part of more advanced tiers if they already have something universally. One of the things that we do and part of what I help districts do is really help to figure out how does that work within your existing resources that you use, but also how does it enhance what you're already using so that we can make sure that we're actually getting at the outcomes that you want to get at.
Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, this is something that's really exciting in the sense that a lot of times that these skills have been referred to as soft skills and how do you measure those? And so we kind of, yes, they're important, but always kind of have been pushed aside. So I think it sounds really amazing that you can capture a way to measure these skills and hone in on the deficits as well as the strengths of students. I had a kind of a question along the lines of Dr. Mathern there with the idea of these lesson plans and having it be, again, something on top of what teachers are already doing in this world of how do we fit it all in. And so I guess my question stems from, one, how much time do teachers need to dedicate, and or is this something that can be embedded in things that they are already doing? So it's a part of their normal everyday, how they're running their classrooms.
Yeah. Again, there's so much flexibility in being able to really cater it to the way that you need to cater it to. And one of the things that to be aware of is the lessons that we have put together are very much able to be done as is, as part of like if there is an existing time within the school day. So a lot of times like elementary schools will have like a morning meeting time. And so it could be done during that time in terms of the instructional piece. During middle and high school, you're looking at if there's an advisory time or homeroom time, whatever it happens to be called here. So if there's a dedicated time, then that helps to smooth the road for implementation. However, we work with all sorts of districts, and so we work to see how does this fit, because what we don't want it to be is another thing to add on. It is not a separate thing. It's something that teachers actually do this all day long. And so one of the tricky parts is really helping educators to see what are you doing and how does that align with what this is asking you to do. So how can we potentially use the skills that you're teaching and then enhance that through instructional best practices throughout the school day? In terms of the assessment piece for the educator rating is really I used to explain it to my educators, like think about a planning period. Within a planning period, the DESA Mini takes 1 minute a student. So if you complete that, and then typically you'll have about a handful of students that might need a full DESA, and the full DESA takes about 5 minutes. So within a planning period, you'll have data on the social, behavioral, and emotional skills that your students need that would then drive your instruction, potentially, and hopefully, honestly, drive your instructional best practices so that you can make instruction more impactful. Because a lot of time what ends up happening is our instruction can be very much enhanced by students' ability to, and I see on the board behind you, their ability to communicate effectively with each other in partner work, their ability to collaborate on projects. So when we can really focus on building those skills, that actually makes instruction more productive, saving time in the classroom. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay.
Other questions? RJ.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doctor, in the process of professional development for teachers and all, what kind of time are we talking about, and how does that alter what they presently do? I mean, where's the flexibility for innovation and all to be able to still be available to them as they work with students in a student-centered world that a lot of this is driving towards?
Yeah, actually, using a student-centered approach is actually probably the most impactful way that it can be implemented within schools. Part of the professional learning helps them. There's kind of a twofold piece to this. Part of it is looking at onboarding, and that can look differently depending on where they are in the implementation process. So we have in-person professional learning options. We also, for part of the onboarding, have self-paced options that are built in right within the system that really can be done within. I would say the best way to do that is in alignment with maybe existing structures such as like a staff meeting or a PLC time. So that you're not asking teachers to do something additionally. So that really is a good way to kind of think about that. It requires them to really just, number one, understand the system and how to use that data to make decisions. On the back end, you also want them to understand how to use that good data to then drive what they're doing in the classroom. And that's part of that deeper implementation that, again, can look different for different districts. I've done that work with whole group professional learning, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's in person, but we've also done it kind of a smaller group PLC work. So it really just depends on what works best for the district. Do you want to add anything?
Yep, go ahead. Thank you. And one of the discussions we've been talking about is, okay, as you look at the profile of a graduate and the growth that we're working on, it's not about credits. It's not about what students have checked off. It's about where's the growth in the pursuit of a lifelong growth. And we're only measuring a unit of time. Now that's going to be very flexible for a lot of students because they're going to be a different. If you've got an answer to an easy way to evaluate that, I'd love to hear that, because that becomes one of the real challenges if we even think in that direction is, okay, kids are going to be at different levels, but how do I determine their problem solving ability, their critical thinking in that, and put it all together with something like this? Is that a possible question to ask you, or am I asking you the impossible?
You're not asking me the impossible. I would say nothing. Well, I would love to tell you that there's some easy answer. There's no easy answer. However, what I will tell you that as you were asking the question, what I pictured in my mind is that student self-report that we have at middle school and high school. Because what we really need students to do is really starting to take ownership of that growth. And so helping them to start see, where do I see skills that I'm showing in the classroom? when I'm at home taking care of my brothers and sisters, when I'm at my part-time job after school, where am I seeing my skills and where do I need to grow next? So that when I have that conversation with my school counselor that talks about, okay, what do you want to do after high school? I can be more informed in that discussion. And I can have more of a say in what I want to do. I hope it's okay to do this. I have 3 children of my own. And, you know, this is not something that I just do for other people's children. We talk about this all the time in my own household, probably to my kids probably sick of it. But seeing the real life outcomes of these, when my oldest daughter got her first job, and I said, when you go for that interview, let's talk about, they're going to ask you, what are your strengths? So let's talk about that. How'd you build those strengths? And that's really part of the beauty of that student self-report portal, is really helping students to start to take ownership and start to see those strengths within themselves. So that to me is exciting. I think that is really part of what I saw in your question.
One quick addition to that, that I think has been feedback we've gotten from educators who have implemented this and seen it work in real life contexts, is how it changes the way that educators see their students, from sort of challenges or problems to be solved, if they're especially in the elementary years when they might be acting out or having behavior issues, to at promise, right? What are the strengths that I can help cultivate and help this student see in themselves at such an early age, and then foster those things in daily communications in the classroom. I think just the mentality switch of identifying a student that has a strength versus seeing them for the behavior issues that might be manifesting for whatever reason. Those are the things that, you know, just change daily practices for teachers without additional time, back to Amy's question. And those are the things that have been transformative, not just in the way, you know, a student sort of has a piece of data and gets some instruction, but in the way that daily instruction takes place. I think that can be extremely powerful and then you see the growth in the benchmarking of year over year with the DESA.
Any other questions? I always got to check my screen in this technology world, but I don't see any questions. Oh, Debbie did put her hand up. Go ahead, Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see on another slide that was sent to us, it appears that you have these whole class lessons. Okay, and you just didn't share those with us right now. Okay, got that. So now this data that you're talking about, can it be gathered together so that there's a whole classroom report that can be shared with the principal?
Yeah, you can actually look at the data by school, by class, by student, also by small group. We have a way to look at custom groups. So especially when you're working with school counselors, psych, social workers in the school buildings, if they're working with certain groups of students to really build that skill building, that's really where I think, yes, the scope and sequence program that my colleague has up on the screen, that's where that can come in very handy. But that lesson plan that we included in your packet, that's just an example of one of the lessons that could be done as a whole class at the what we call the universal level, that classroom level. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I assume that this data could also be shared at the state level.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things, so we work, as Dickie mentioned earlier, with the state of Connecticut. And as an example, one of the things that we do is roll up, they have districts all over the state that use the DESA in a very specific way to align with what they are trying to accomplish as a state. We roll that state level data up and are able to track sort of progress year over year, student over student. And see, you know, it also helps the state sort of guide where are they going to focus strategic initiatives over time. So, for example, if they have a lot going on in the mental health world in Connecticut, they're really focused on building the mental health capacity of educators and of their students. And so, one of the things that they looked at is how are they doing in terms of optimistic thinking? That's one of the skills measured by the DESA. And then tracking with this, a lot of concerted efforts that they're investing in their mental health initiatives. Are they seeing measured growth in optimistic thinking in their students? And they actually have, which is really exciting. So it's a great way to sort of focus initiatives of the state or of a district, and then look at an aggregate level. If are they seeing measured growth over time?
Thank
Dr.
you.
Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up to that. Is this pushed out from the state level, or was it districts that adopted it and then they pushed it up? Like what was the path that they took?
This one was a state adoption led
Okay.
by the state, in alignment with their sort of focus on social emotional behavioral skill building in their students. We have seen it done both ways. I think the benefits of the state level sort of leadership in this is some consistency across how do we want to do this? To what end are we trying to accomplish? Like what are the goals? And then using goals to back into how we want to implement this. And it also creates this amazing community for educators who are doing this innovative work and haven't seen it work before. Where are you fitting it into your schedule? How are you getting buy-in from teachers for one more thing, when it's really not one more thing, it's enhancing the great work that you're already doing and giving some structure and focus to it. It's also creates a lot of cross-team opportunities for professional learning communities across districts within a state. And we've seen that be incredibly powerful. We've done cohorts in Connecticut where district leaders have gotten together and talked about ways that they've implemented, what's worked, what they could do better, how they can learn from one another. So having the state buy-in and support has actually allowed for a much more robust implementation. And I think that's why they're seeing some of the results that they're seeing today.
Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I just kind of a comment. I'm just excited to see where this can go for our state, and just knowing that we are all so passionate about profile of a graduate, and just seeing, we had this discussion yesterday of the graduation standards versus graduation requirements and how we measure those 7 competencies or soft skills or whatever we want to call them, and how we were saying, that's really difficult in this system to just say it's a checkbox, but more of a fluid approach of, they might have part of these skills or, partially meeting these. And so, I'm just excited to see how we can possibly use this moving forward. And really, we're expecting our educators, we're listing this as such a priority that we expect our students to have these skills post-graduation, but yet we're not really providing our teachers and staff yet with the tools and then supports to do it. We're saying this is a priority. Everyone recognizes this is a priority. And so I'm hoping this measure, will help us to realize that, this is a priority and we're going to help support them. But how can you support staff if you can't really individualize for students what their needs are? And so this just looks like it's such a wonderful tool to be able to do that. So thank you guys for this. I'm excited.
Any other questions?
Sorry.
Amy, that's fine. This is great. You're taking over Mark's place, so that's great.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, now I've lost my train of thought for my question. It came back to me. How do you see this working with things that districts already have in place? For instance, I don't know if you've heard of sources of strength that some districts, have already implemented and are very passionate about. And there's a wide variety of other things. So how do you see that working with things that are already in place?
Yeah, actually, we, in the former district that I worked in, we implemented sources of strength right before I actually transitioned out. And I was really excited about, because really the whole point of sources of strength is to identify strengths, right? So it actually was a beautiful alignment of what that program focused on, and building support networks within schools. And then being able, again, to match that with a student being able to say, like, okay, these are my strengths. And I know these are my strengths because this is how I see them. So it was really a beautiful alignment. But that's really the point of really having conversations about implementation. You can't just give a box to someone and say, okay, go for it. We can talk about onboarding, and that can be very successful, but to make implementation what we call sticky, they need to know how to do the things that you're asking about. And so that's part of what I support districts in doing, is really starting to connect those dots. How does that fit in with what you're already doing? Because I don't want you to work harder. I want us to help to streamline and enhance the work that you're doing. So how does this work together? And let's create a picture. Because one of the things that we have to really help districts and schools understand is, first of all, why are we doing this? How is it connecting to your statewide initiatives? What is it? How is it going to look? And then what are the resources that we're going to put into place to make sure that that plan that we're talking about is actually going to happen? And then also inviting educators into that process of creating that plan. We want to make sure that it makes sense, because if it doesn't make sense and it's not feasible within a school day, then people aren't going to do it. I mean, we see that in education a lot, right? So we have to be very cognizant of how that lays out. And that's part of like what we've done with Connecticut, in that statewide partnership, is really look at all those pieces, parts, so that by the time it trickles down to the educator, the student, the family, it makes sense for everyone. Yeah.
Any other questions?
We just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here in your beautiful state. It's been an honor, and we're looking forward to the continued conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys. Really, we appreciate all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Brent ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to then we take it back after that. This one.
Okay, let's do it. Ellen and I are talking about the agenda item, so I believe we're to the Finance Committee and Trent. So would you like to introduce Trent?
Sure. First of all, if you would please refresh your board docs, there is a new attachment for you, which is the, and we're going to share screen. So if you don't feel like refreshing your board docs, that's fine. But if you would like to do that, you just go to the top and you hit the little circle, hit the circle.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, if you do so, you will find the budget that Trent's going to talk through with us. So we just wanted to remind and refresh all of us on the board about what our categories of expenditures are, what the series mean, and essentially look at our new biennium budget, keeping top of mind, of course, that we are stewards of state money, and therefore we need to be very conscious of that. So the Finance Committee always has that at the top of our mind when we're talking and making decisions. But I just wanted Trent to walk through this since he's the expert on this. Trent, are you ready?
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Krieger. I
Yep.
believe I'm ready. Can you hear me okay? Can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes, good. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, I am Trent Carroll, Chief Operations Officer here at the Wyoming Department of Education and also the CFO. So I will do a quick run through of the 25-26 budget. The state of Wyoming operates on a 2-year budget cycle. So this budget will begin July 1st of this year and operate through June 30th of 2026. The state board did not request any additional funds for this next biennium, so we're using what we call the standard budget. So the numbers are very much the same going forward for the next 2 years as they were for this current biennium that we are just wrapping up now. So on the, most of you are probably familiar with the treasurer's report that you see at your meetings. And I believe we have the budgeted amounts and the expenditures and balances rolled up to what we call the budget series level. So the 100 series, the 200 series, 900 series, et cetera. The view that I'm sharing on my screen right now is a little bit more detailed, and it actually provides the object level detail. I thought that might be helpful to just kind of walk through the categories that comprise each of those budget series. So the first one here, I guess before I jump into that, one more piece of context. The state board receives 2 appropriations, essentially, one from the state general fund. And you'll see that represented here on my screen under this section for Fund 001. And then you also receive an appropriation from the School Foundation Program account. And that one is coded under Fund 009. So as we start with the general fund portion of the budget, you'll see that the first category is the 100 series. And that's what we use for the board member salaries and benefits category. you'll see that we don't actually have any money budgeted in the 100 series. That's been standard practice for a long time because these the board member positions are not, they're kind of special in the accounting system and the budget, in that they aren't actually budgeted. So we end up moving funds each year from another series, typically the travel series. So you'll see we start with 0. There will be a revision that will occur. We'll work with the finance subcommittee to determine the amount that we want to start with. I believe last year, or this last biennium, it was about $25,000. But we'll have that conversation, and I'm sure that'll come back to the full body. The next category is the 200 series. You'll see we have money budgeted for memberships and dues in the amount of $39,473. 0221 is in-state travel, $89,648. And remember, some of that money will move up to the 100 series for the board member salaries. We have 23,037 budgeted for out-of-state travel, just over 2,600 for office supplies, 2,500 for food service supplies, and $300 for educational supplies. So those are the categories that make up the 200 series of the general fund portion of the budget. We have $2,275 budgeted in the 400 series for telecommunications, and $44,290 for contracted services in the 900 series under Object 0901. The total budget for the general fund portion is $204,148. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the School Foundation program budget, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the requirements for moving money between series, et cetera. So in the School Foundation program budget, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here now that I'm on the lower section. So we have the 100 series in this portion of the budget is established for the board coordinator position, salary and benefits. You'll see the amount there for 2 years. We have $23,422 budgeted for in-state travel for that position. And then we also have just over $101,543 for contract services in the 009 portion. So the total appropriation from the School Foundation program is $424,314. And the total combined budget from both is $628,462. So that is a really quick run through of the board budget. It's pretty straightforward. And like I mentioned earlier, it hasn't really changed. We do find the need during the biennium to make some small revisions. Sometimes we expend funds from an object that you don't see listed here. And so we would essentially move the amount necessary at that time to cover that cost. So historically, there have been some restrictions when it comes to moving money between the series. Typically, we are not able to move money from the 100 series into another budget series. But that restriction has changed going forward. So there was a governor's veto during this last session that actually removed the language in the budget bill that has been there the past few budgets. And it was there again, the legislature intended for that requirement to be in effect for the 25-26 biennium, but the governor vetoed that language. And so those restrictions are no longer in place. What isn't clear to me yet is how the executive branch intends to manage that, if there will be any, I guess, soft restrictions imposed by the state budget department or the governor's office. So there could be, but as of right now, that language that they've typically pointed to as a restriction in the budget bill is no longer there. Money in the other series, the 200 series and the 900 series, is flexible. It can be moved either within the series between the objects or between the series from, say, the 200 series into the 900 series or vice versa. So there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to expending the funds that you've received. And typically the process that we work through is we align the budget with the priorities of the board. So when it becomes known if you need money for contracts or for other initiatives, we would set that up for you when necessary. As we move forward into the biennium, we'll have regular conversations with the finance subcommittee. We will begin preparation work for the 27-28 biennium budget. Actually, here in a few months, we'll start that process at the end of the calendar year, and then moving into next spring, we'll ramp that up, and we'll need to review the longer term projections for the state board and what your budget will look like in the next request. So more information to come on that. As we move forward into this year and early next year, we'll have a lot of conversations with the finance subcommittee, and I'm happy to come back to the full board and answer questions or present information upon request. So, Mr. Chair, that's what I had prepared for this morning. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Trent. Taylor.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Trent, for this information, and Ellen and all the work you guys do. I guess I just have a question as far as always, I really value transparency and having a clear picture of where our state dollars are spent. And so I'm just kind of curious. I understand the justification that you're not required to allocate those funds in a certain category, but I'm wondering why we've chosen not to have a budget for state board member salaries. Reason being is I think if, someone from the public were to look at something like this and see the amount of money that's spent on in-state travel, they would think, first of all, that's very high, and wonder, why we wouldn't, conduct more virtual meetings, things like that, where I felt like if it is in categories correctly, it would reduce some of that maybe question as far as is there being responsible spending on the state board? So that's my question.
Mr. Chair, through you, appreciate the question. That's a really good question. So the reason historically that we haven't budgeted that money in the 100 series, well, there are a couple of reasons. Some limitations with our state budget system, but we haven't pushed very hard on that. And the main reason is because of that restriction that I mentioned has been in place historically, where you really lose that flexibility when money is budgeted in the 100 series to move it anywhere else. And since the number of meetings, the type of meetings, whether they're virtual or if there's prep salary or anything else, has been somewhat unknown from year to year. The maximum flexibility I think was achieved by budgeting the money in the travel line and then moving it up essentially as needed when it became a little more clear what those costs would be. But I totally appreciate the comments around transparency, and my recommendation to the board would be if the restrictions really have been lifted, and this is kind of a change in this biennium where money can be moved out of the 100 series. If you budget, let's say 25,000 and you only end up using 20,000 and you have somebody left there and you could use it somewhere else. If that flexibility exists now, then I would 100% recommend that the board budget in the 100 series going forward in the next budget so that everything does line up as accurately as possible for the board, for the public, for everyone involved, because it is the most transparent way to do it for sure.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Chair, just a comment maybe on Taylor's comment. One way to be more transparent would be to actually look at the actuals once a biennium is finished and see how it all shook out, as opposed to the budget, which is really, our best guess of the future. So, that might be a way to study how we would allocate it for that following year.
Go ahead, Dickie.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to follow up on that, and thank you, Trent, for the rundown, to just continue along this questioning. Since it does look like there's an action item to approve the budget today, is there a safe amount that we could pull from in-state travel or out-of-state travel, or a combination of both, to put in the salaries that we know we would for sure spend based on historical expenditures, just to, even though it may not be perfect, at least be a little more reflective of what the actuals will be?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Dickie, to your question, yes, we certainly could. I think the past several years, $25,000 would be, I think, a good number to start with. And you may include language if there's a motion up to. And that way it would essentially earmark that money for that purpose, but it would still allow us to transfer money in as we go along, as we know what those costs are. We typically start with a larger amount the first year, and then the second year transfer smaller amounts more often when we know how many meetings there will be, the length of the meetings, et cetera. But we could certainly start with 25,000. I think that would be a good number.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trent. Any other questions for Trent or the Finance Committee? Joe?
It's probably been asked before, but I don't remember. Can we move from the school foundation program to the general fund or vice versa?
Mr. Chair, through you, we cannot move between the funds without a request to do so in the biennial budget, or what we call a B11 request, which is a request that the executive branch uses through the governor during the interim months between legislative sessions. That type of funding change would be a little bit more complicated than moving within the appropriation.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the finance gurus? Thanks, Trent. You always do a nice job, so we appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just real quick, want to share my appreciation for the work of Ellen and the other members on the finance subcommittee. We have a great group, and they have some great ideas, and I think we've made some good improvements. So really appreciate the collaboration from them.
And as I said here, one quick question probably for you guys is, you were working on a more detailed budget process at some point. Is that correct?
That's in process. That is correct.
Okay, all right.
Yes, we're not ready to share that with you.
Okay, perfect.
So there. Yes, we are working on it. It's in very early prototype stage.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Trent. Let's take a quick 5-minute break and then we can start.
Thanks.
So move to approve the budget with up to 25,000 in the 100 series of the general. Move
Yeah,
from in-state travel.
from in-state travel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is why we do it, is because you can't,
Right.
once it's in there, you can't.
I know.
And I don't want to lose it.
No,
So it's almost impossible to predict how many people are gonna be at these meetings, how much, I mean, it's been like all over the place. I mean, I agree. I mean, what we should probably do is show what we spent last year, so people know this is what we spent. Because
but we do get the budget report and that has it in it.
Oh, always,
Correct, right.
always. We just have to be careful we don't. Yeah.
Amy, are we good to go? Okay. We'll come back to order so we can move forward. Was that an echo?
Yep. It's Catherine.
Well, at least we know who did it. All right. I think we're at 5, right? Is that where we're at? Yes. Group work.
Yes. So Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm going to suggest it's not an agenda change, but how you approach this group work. A suggestion here. I'm wondering, think about the discussions forthcoming are going to be kind of 2 strands, right? The work product that we hope that you develop in this group is going to be at least a draft of your next year's goals, your work goals, what you want to see happen in the next year. But underneath those, you always look at your duties and responsibilities, and this ongoing one that's been talked about is the statute that calls for you to set statewide educational goals. There's really another one too, and this is why you have NAEP information in your packet. That it's a separate statute, and it talks about establishing improvement goals for public schools based on the state assessment and the NAEP. Now that really muddies the water, right? So there's kind of 2 layers of these state goals you're supposed to be setting, one for statewide education goals, one specifically for public and schools improvement goals based on NAEP. And so I say that because if you want to incorporate some of those responsibilities onto some of the work you want to get done this next year, we thought it would be helpful for you to hear a little bit more about that history of that statute that calls for you to set statewide educational goals. I'm going to suggest at this point that you go ahead with that presentation with Catherine, and then that can just be when you break out into groups. It won't be break out for one reason, come back, go break out again. Then we could do the breakout, and I think that's where you could get those drafted for some goals that you might want to set for the next year. So that would be my suggestion, whichever is the pleasure of the board.
That sounds like that'll work. Catherine.
Share my screen here. Okay, so this provision of the statute came up during a standards committee meeting. And the weird thing about that was that Dr. Mathern had a few questions revolving this statute. And just to recap what those were, basically, what is the intent behind this statute? When did it come about? And why is it here? And what does it mean for the state board to establish goals for public education when, the governor has RIDE and the superintendent has initiatives? Is there anything exclusive about this, or what does it mean for the board to do this? So, there we go. So in doing the legal research and trying to answer this question, one of the things that we do is first find that provision, when did it come about, and then look at the whole statutory scheme. You can sometimes determine what the legislature intended when you look at the other things that they were doing in that session year, and derived some insight from that. So my first guess was to turn to 1997, which is the basket of goods, which was the establishment of the board to determine what a high quality public education is in Wyoming. And from there, fulfill a student's fundamental constitutional right to that education and how to distribute it in a uniform way. But when I looked at those session laws, I found that this provision here about establishing goals was already in statute. So I had to go further back. And so I just went all the way back. I went to the beginning of the beginning, which is actually the Wyoming Constitution. And you'll see here that the superintendent of public instruction has a constitutional obligation to provide general supervision. And we know some of what that means from case law in the Campbell cases, but it's also interesting to see how the initial drafters of statute interpreted what general supervision meant in their first drafts. So I was able to kind of categorize what general supervision means into three distinct roles. And the first one is administrate, that the superintendent is charged with administrating educational programs throughout the state. And you'll see here, interestingly enough, the first superintendent appointed all the members of the board. The superintendent sat on the board, but you can see some of the functions here fall under the category of administration, in that the superintendent will have field agents. The statute said that the field agents will have ample rooms in their offices, and I believe that's still on the books today. The superintendent, I know, so I hope they do, because we might have a conversation if their offices are too small. It's really funny. Some of these old statutes are really funny. The superintendent would take a census of the school and the school children. The superintendent would contract with publishing houses for school books. You'll notice in the Constitution that the superintendent cannot prescribe textbooks, and that was really in place to avoid corruption, that they were concerned that the superintendent might puff up their finances by working with publishing houses. Another thing is that the superintendent would maintain a list of certified teachers and certified schools. This provision really is the antecedent for what became over time the accreditation program. The superintendent also had a very interesting judicial function. He would explain the true intent and meaning of the educational laws that were established by the board. The superintendent would enforce the rules that were promulgated by the board. And so what you see when you start looking through these old laws is this pattern that while the superintendent comes from the Constitution, the early drafters, I think, felt like something was missing, that there needed to be a balance between administration and enforcement, and then another kind of generative force, which was the board, which in this case, you'll see the board was like the legislature, and the superintendent was the judicial branch and also the executive branch. So this very fundamental theory of governance and how we do this in a collective arrangement and checks and balances. The superintendent could also revoke teacher certifications. So what you see here is that for almost every function that the superintendent serves, the board has an equally important balancing function on the other side of it, which I think you'll see come about when we talk about the board's first roles. The superintendent is also a very political figure in our state. He was, and she is today. She serves as a figure to develop public sentiment on education. She also sits on this board. She has a constitutional right to sit on the board of trustees at the university. She would consult schools. And so she has all these different things, and one fundamental part of it is to be a figurehead or a spokesperson for public education. The state board, as it came into existence in these early statutes, you'll see that the primary goal was to be a thoughtful generator of policy, an informed generator of policy. All members of the board shall be persons of mature years, which is so cute. They'll be known for their integrity and culture and public spirit and business ability. It's just adorable. They also, one of their main things was their first thing, and you'll see this in the law books today, that when you look at your practice act, the first ones that show up are really the oldest ones. You'll see that as things come along, they get tacked onto your practice act, but as standards are up front, up at the top, that indicates that it was one of the first functions, and the primary functions was to determine what the course of study would be in our state. It was also a form of standardized grading. The board would figure out a way to make sure that all students were held to the same grading scale, which is interesting because while local control is a great value of ours now, you can see that it wasn't always that way. The board had incredible authority to dictate exactly what went on in the classroom. The board published a list of approved textbooks. So while the superintendent couldn't prescribe textbooks, the board actually did. The provision said that you'd give a list for schools to be able to pick and choose what they needed depending on their needs, but all schools had the same list that they had to pick books from. The board had oversight over vocational schools and special schools. So you'll see that the board's oversight over CTE actually dates back a very long time. The board also published reading for the teachers. It was like a big book club or a reading list that teachers had to prove that they actually read it and send something back to the board. It was like, yes, I read the book you wanted me to read. And the board too initially was the Professional Teaching Standards Board. They determined what kind of certification or qualifications a teacher needed in order to work. And then the superintendent would revoke those things. So you can see here what emerges is things like the board establishing a reading list of textbooks, and then the superintendent would publish it and distribute it out to the schools. Or the board would determine what it meant to be a teacher, and then the superintendent could take that certificate away. It's sort of like this give and take. And while I think that these two roles are different sides of the same coin, there is a lot of blending. You'll see that in the statutes today, and Diana referred to it yesterday as a shared responsibility, and there are a lot of those. But the main link, I think, the functional piece that communicated between the superintendent's office and the Department of Education and the board was once a commissioner of education. He was appointed by the state board, but supervised by the superintendent. And he was a fine gentleman. He had literary and scientific attainments. He also had practical knowledge in how schools are organized and managed. So obviously, we don't have a commissioner of education today, but we absolutely do, which is the coordinator. So the commissioner is the historical antecedent for what is now these days our coordinator. And when the need arose, when the conversation started that the board needed a very knowledgeable staff member, we did look way back at the commissioner as a kind of a model for what would become the coordinator. And you can see a lot of the functions that the coordinator does now are the same things that the commissioner did back in 1919. The commissioner toured schools and started conversations with teachers and school leaders about what was going on in their classroom. The commissioner stimulated public interest and informed the public. So the commissioner was engaging in all kinds of conversations in schools, but also communities. And he was really a sort of a mouthpiece for the board. They would take the policy ideas of the board and take it out into the community and hear what the community had to say, and then bring it back to the board. It was a conversation ongoing between the people of the state and the board. So the listening sessions that we do, the conversations we have about what's going on nationally, these things all still exist today. This final provision you'll see here is that the commissioner, together with the board, will conduct investigations regarding educational needs and progress. And I wanted to point that one out because, Mr. Chairman, you brought it up yesterday in our list of, in that table that Diana has, that's very helpful. You pointed out the one about facilitating discussions on the needs for and the means of improving education. And this is the initial draft of that, is that the board will conduct investigations. It was finally revised to say facilitate discussions around, which I think is something that we do all the time on this board. So really the heart of, or the historical function of the board is something that I think is kind of, it's supposed to be a little slow. It's supposed to be a little thoughtful. It's supposed to be investigative. It's supposed to be conversational. So while I know I've heard some of you say, gosh, we gotta get things done. We gotta get things done. I think the slowness or the deliberate processes that we take are baked into the function of this board. While the superintendent's office is kind of the counterpart to that, because if you need expertise and you need capacity, you need psychometricians, scientists to talk about assessment, or Dr. Fleechek to talk about accountability. Those things are best housed inside the department's capable hands. So time passes, of course, and the roles do change, but these fundamental tenets of expertise and capacity in the department and the investigative discussions stay with the board. So as all these things come along, the first question is, if it's an educational program that is born in our legislature or federally, the first question is, who does this belong to? Who has the best oversight ability over this program, and who should it land with? And what you'll see is, as programs come, like federal programs or state planning, these kinds of things typically land inside the department. Whereas these other programs that might need community input or insight or investigation, those things generally land with the board. There are some anomalies. So if you see some program that doesn't seem to fit under those two theories, it might just be that at that point in time, the legislature had some distrust for one entity or another. Because it's not surprising that in this system of checks and balances, and while one entity has a clear role and the other has a clear role, but they're supposed to be collaborating all the time, there are dysfunctions that can arise and there are disagreements that arise, and who is in charge of what becomes an ongoing question. So with that, I finally found it in 1994. I did go through all the session logbooks. And the funny thing about that is I didn't have to go all the way back to 1919. I started in 97. I could have gone a couple years back, but I'm really glad that I did, because while I almost never have a straight answer, as you know, as attorneys don't, the answer is in all those years. It is a pattern, or it is a philosophy that develops over time. So I finally found it in 1994. And when I looked at the whole scheme and when I tried to figure out why this one provision about establishing statewide goals is tacked on to the End of Your Practice Act, when I look at all of them, they are a curious collection of amendments. So you'll see here that any federal program that requires a state plan goes to the department. Also, this is the year where the liaison comes into play. You'll see that a majority of the vote of the entire board is required to take official action, which is an interesting, I think, unique provision for this board. I represent 9 other boards, and I haven't seen another one like it. nothing in this section shall give the state board rulemaking authority in any area specifically designated to the superintendent. And the superintendent has a mirror provision under her act. And instead of investigations, you'll see that we are now facilitating discussions. What I think is happening in 1994 is that the board might have been getting out of their lane a little bit. You'll see here that they are limiting rulemaking authority to programs that are directly under the board's purview. You'll see that it limits the board's legal action, that the board cannot institute a lawsuit unless it's consulting with the superintendent. So whenever there's dysfunction or disagreements about who does what, the legislature has this reaction to try to solve the problem by doing some of these things. And then at the end of all these amendments, it says the board will establish statewide goals for public education, as I think a reminder that the board has typically been the legislator of ideas, has been the generative force as opposed to the administrative force. And I just to wrap that up, I don't think that anybody can say that this board is not fulfilling its obligation to establish statewide goals. That's all we did yesterday. That is the profile of the graduate. That is all these conversations that we're having. And I believe that it is being fulfilled. If I was to make a humble suggestion, it might be that when we do look at our goals or the board's goals, again, I really do think that those meet the letter of the law and the spirit of that intent, because your goals are student-centered. They are talking to teachers and talking about teachers and talking about educational policy. My only suggestion would be to, when we take a look at them, it might come as a benefit over time to look at the alignment. If we create new rules and place them on the board, or if we just look at ours in light of this, it might help to then someday check in on them and see, are we establishing them? What are they and how are we achieving them? That's a kind of a nice bookend to the end of your practice act, which is this your purpose, and occasionally checking in to check our progress and our success in these things. So I know that is a very legal and unstraightforward answer to why this provision exists. But I found the research very interesting, and I guess I just wanted to share some of that with you.
Thanks, Catherine. I know Mark's got his mic on, but I'm going to beat him to it this time.
Go for it.
Yeah.
When you bring up the 94 deal,
Yeah.
my memory, which I'm getting kind of long in the tooth, but I think there was a big reorganization of a lot of state government right then. And so did that show up anywhere that it was more than just the education world? And the reason I say that is I know they tried to reorganize the livestock board right then. I was on the livestock board. So I'm just curious.
It could have been. And I didn't look at any other boards that year, but that session law was pretty thick. It looked like a very active session, but I didn't get into the specifics of them.
I know there was a big push for that right in that time frame, but I don't know if it's Dr. Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Catherine, thanks for doing that research. It does help. I know lots of things have changed in 100 years. And I appreciate that phrase about, maybe something was happening in 94 where there was a reminder for the board to stay in its lane.
Yeah.
I know Diana has used that term several times about, what is our work?
Yeah.
As you think about that phrase, establish statewide goals for public education, I guess part of what I'm asking is, you talk about us being sort of a legislator of ideas. Is there, based on your review and expectation, that we would establish those goals and we would ask the state superintendent's team to help carry those goals out? Is there a provision in in the law that says, you know, the governor should establish goals for education, the superintendent should establish goals for education?
Mhm.
Or should, and I know it's hard to get different branches to actually,
Work
you know,
together.
take direction from the other branch, but
Right.
is there a sense from
Right.
what you're saying that in a way, if we're out in front, the
Mhm.
others would help us accomplish those goals? Or do you see us? I mean,
Yeah.
part of this original thing was,
Yeah.
you know, we have goals in each of the three branches.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
realize I'm part of one of those, but
Right.
can you talk a
Right.
little more about where you think the order of
Right.
whose goals should set the lead come in?
Right. That is a really good question. And I have two thoughts about that. The first is I think there is a clear assumption throughout all the provisions that the department and the board work collaboratively. And the governor, as the head of the executive branch, really does set the tempo and has the authority to establish policy for the entire executive branch. So there is an underlining expectation that they all work together and support each other. The second part of that is I don't think that no one department or no one entity, when it comes to education specifically, has exclusive authority to do any one thing almost. And the Supreme Court talks about that in the Powers case when it talked about what general supervision was. For at the time, the superintendent, Cindy Hill, says the superintendent has the constitutional authority for general supervision, but not exclusively, because nobody has ever questioned the legitimacy of this board to also do it. And the court says they have to support each other. And while there's inherent tensions that arise over time, no one is exclusive, and each entity brings something very valuable to the table. And they have to work together and support each other. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. I guess I still am stuck. I don't want to send the school districts a message that any goal we would establish is somehow more work because we have goals from the governor.
Right.
Or we have, I don't even know if they're goals. We have activities from the governor.
Right.
We have activities from the state superintendent. So I'm torn. Do I just sort of fall in line with their initiatives and try to backwards design a goal, or do we just put this on hold until someday when those two entities aren't taking the lead? I don't know. Maybe that's a conversation for all of us.
That would be a conversation. And regrettably, I don't think there is a legal basis or answer for that. And over time, you'll see that programs come and go, and who has the absolute authority over one thing or priority or the biggest microphone. It's sometimes clear, depending on the program, but when it comes to goals, which is such a vague and overreaching project, you can't say really.
RJ.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it possible that in creating the goals or a goal or whatever for the board, that it's more holistic in nature and encompasses the general purpose of what we're all here for, so that it does cover those entities' goals, instead of trying to create or set specific goals?
Right. Yeah, I think so. And I think that was basically what I was trying to convey in my conclusion, is that profile of a graduate is a goal, and the board's goals that you'll talk about are also meeting that
that expectation that it is a holistic thing. And it doesn't mean that we have to generate a whole new program.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mark.
I actually was thinking the very thing, Catherine, about the profile, that very well may be the closest we've come to establishing a statewide goal for public education. This is what we want a graduate to look like.
Yeah.
It's very philosophical.
Yeah.
It's very inclusive of public opinion.
Right.
It's very investigative.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't think that we were establishing one of those goals or
Right.
fulfilling that legislative
Right.
responsibility, but
Right.
I know that's kind of an easy out, but on the other hand, it's a difficult lift, and we've been working hard on that. And maybe that's the best goal for Wyoming education we can create right now.
Yeah.
Ellen.
Mr. Chair, I think also that it serves all four of our purposes under statute, right? Because it in a big umbrella inherently addresses standards, accountability, assessment, all of the accreditation, all of those things. Because without those things being in place, our profile can't be fulfilled. And so I think like it's this North Star, but all of those things are reaching to it. So I think you're right. I think that is exactly what we've done.
I think so too. And the profile came about using the same resources and ideas that were given to you in these early statutes, which is public input and the listening sessions. That is exactly how the board was designed.
RJ.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And well, and the other thing that I think it does, it doesn't tell people what you got to do. It just has a picture of what the future should be. And instead of it being static, it's dynamic in nature. Nobody's got it to a specific so that it can change with the future as needed to better meet the needs of the kids. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And I guess maybe one last piece of this is if we would formally act, I know we formally accepted the profile, we've formally pushed on each component. We've built toolkits, done all kinds of things, but maybe sort of one additional message we can send to the people of Wyoming is this is our goal for education, that we want kids to look like this. And so, as you said, Ellen, all of our work is really designed to push toward that North Star. But labeling the profile as the state board's goal, I mean, making them connected. That might be maybe one last sort of message about the inherent importance of that work we're doing.
Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Lambert. Just to summarize, I think everyone has said it really nicely. I agree with the kind of board goal around the Portrait of a Graduate. I think that'd be a nice, clean focus area. And what it also allows too, I think RJ brought this up, is it allows for districts to use that. Every district, I think, will attack it differently, but that's the goal. That's sort of the touchdown. And I think a lot of districts appreciate that. They like having those kind of a guardrail to shoot for. Now, it also takes into account the small nature of some districts that we have and some of the other larger districts on the east side of the state. They will attack it differently, and that's okay. That's what we want. But I really like the fact that is the focus area. It's understandable, not only for the board, but for the public. And then what happens in the weeds of how districts get there is really a local decision. The product that we heard from earlier that was presented, which I feel like is a wonderful product. There are many products that do that out there, just in different ways. And that should really be the choice of the district to make that decision on how they want to get to measure the competencies of the graduate of a profile. But so I just am just echoing some of the thoughts that have been brought forward. I'm a firm supporter of that being a critical goal of ours. And we can go deeper with it too as we go through the next year to help support districts. We can have listening sessions around how districts are implementing competencies in their district and let districts learn from each other, and then take their own slant in that. So thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions for Catherine or thoughts? Thanks for that, Catherine. That was informative.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Diana, are you?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, maybe if we could pull up then your goals. And I'm wondering, again, just suggesting if to kind of tackle this work and this next piece of group work, I'm hearing you say maybe you'd like to put some thought around the profile or the concept of the profile, maybe the purposes. It really, to me, it really resonated. I think it was Dickie and Joe and some that were in a conversation, even looking at that kind of preamble and some of the beginning of the chapter 31 stuff, that whole kind of piece. If there's a group that might want to go and even jot down some words, what kind of language would inspire this board in a goal and inspire then the state in a goal with something around the profile. You know, I often hear you talk about shared responsibility. I often hear you talk about, you know, that vision and hope for students in the future or something. But even if you put words in some bullet points, we'll get together, we'll draft some things to bring back to you. And then if the other group wants to go through these, you know, you have your goals from this year to see how those are looking. Are there some things over this last day and a half that you might want to add in there or change some language or take out? Thinking more about your more specific work goals for the next year versus the statewide, more inspirational, philosophical broad. Do you want to split in two groups and maybe 20-30 minutes, you might have some pretty good things scratched out if it turns out like yesterday, you were able to really put those things into place.
Yep. And as we break, we are going to lose some people at noon. So we do need to be cognizant of our time, all of us, so that we get to our action items before we start having people that have other obligations leave. So other than that, I think we need to break out and stay focused.
Do you want to do that?
So are you going to
Okay.
break us up?
Sure. And one of the things for those of you that are working on what's this next year, I know you as a board have kept some things on there where you say, well, you know, we don't have a specific plan for like the PD or growing as a CTE board. We always want to do that. If you would kind of designate, even with a little asterisk, those types of things that are just, you wouldn't maybe write a strategic plan around it, but you want that kept in your, versus those things that, if you want to adopt those graduation standards, you want those adopted in this next. That would help. I've just learned over the years for feedback for me and the chairman to help bring the right things to you. So 2 groups, 1 profile, statewide educational goal. 1, let's look at these 7 or 8 things you decided on for a year and any of those you want to move forward or new takeaway. Understand the task?
How much time?
I think it would be really nice if you were ready to come back about 1/4 and could wrap this at 11 and get into your action items. Does that? And if that's shorting you too much, I can check with the chair.
And Diana, before you start numbering people, let's have like Scott, I don't think Debbie's on, but we ought to probably let him choose whatever group stays in this room of whatever he would be interested in, because we didn't do that yesterday. So,
Certainly, we
Yeah.
did, we defaulted them.
yeah, we
didn't
don't
we?
default.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Scott.
so Scott, you get to choose which group would like to stay here.
I got the power.
All right, I get some power here. This is incredible, Bill. I'll stay with the group that does the profile in the room. How about that?
So that's the statewide goal? Yeah.
Statewide goal, yeah.
And do the rest of you want to divide yourself?
Well, we can go get her a little coffee and stir her up.
You might not want to stir me up. I'm not seeing you stir them.
Basically, we're just coming up with the language for the goal
I-
itself, because I feel like we have a consensus on what the goal is, correct?
Right.
Okay.
That's, oh, we have to turn our mics on so Scott can hear us.
Yeah.
Sorry, Scott, none of us had our mics on.
So are we gonna, yeah, statewide goal. So we just need to come up with language for something on the, probably on the profile. Is that where we're headed? I mean, that's kind of where everybody thinks is
Right.
And I'm not a wordsmith, so.
Well, I wonder if we ought to start out something like, as the State Board of Education, we firmly believe the statewide goal would be the profile or something like that. So let the lawyer talk to us.
Well, do we want to include in that the collaboration of the different, and I don't know how to express that necessarily.
But of everybody that's merged together to say this is what they also are
Yeah,
committed.
that's part of it.
Yeah, I think we ought to give recognition to that.
And just to throw it out there for you guys to think about is one of my first comments when we started our meeting about the profile and that how to keep it alive and well, and that ought to be part of that goal is how to keep that a living, breathing document.
Exactly.
And make sure the public and the board knows as we change board members that can be changed or tweaked as we go forward is, does that resonate?
I think it does. I mean, it's a never-ending goal is the way to look at it. Because at no time do you ever come to a point where you say, okay, we're there. I mean, you've always got to continually work on it. I feel.
So without, I mean, to make a goal, to issue this statewide goal, it's got to be specific because you have to be able to attain said goal. Otherwise, it's not
Right.
a goal. So it has to be able to be measured, and so while it can be ongoing, because you want it to continue, how do you measure, the progress within that goal? How do you make sure that everyone's doing said goal? And so I don't know how you write it. Or I guess you what is our ask besides saying, our goal is profile a graduate? Well, what does that mean? Our goal is that every student graduates with representing what we've deemed this profile to be. I'm just kind of vague on what profile the grad. It encompasses so much to make that a goal that can go out. I don't know.
Well, I think I'm not going to contradict you, but I think you have a point. You definitely want a goal to have something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an end point. It has to be a point of focus to how we grow towards the future or whatever. So somehow.
So does the profile guide the work of school districts? Does it become their North Star like it was our North Star in our work?
I think it should give them that North Star, but I don't think we want to tell them how they should get there.
No.
That's their duty. That's their job. So how do we make these students become, it's overused too much, but productive members of society through the display of the profile of the graduate qualities, something like that, where we're saying, okay, yes, ma'am.
Could some of your goal be around some language that involves adoption or engagement and some measure of that within the state and within the communities and business? Because you're just starting out right now.
Yep.
So some measure of engagement or adoption over time.
Absolutely.
I don't know what that would look like or how you would say it.
I like that because it kind of
Yeah.
distinguishes it
Yeah,
from our
right.
vision, which
You're
is
starting it
our
right
stated
there.
vision
Yeah.
is the profile.
Yeah.
And that adds what
Adoption,
Amy was
engagement,
saying.
words like that.
Well, and that gives you some direction, which is what Amy's trying, yeah.
I just added some things in the chat, kind of a statement. I feel like I'm doing mission statements. But
What does that say?
Let's find out.
I'm not-
It says, through the use of the portrait of a graduate, the state board supports whole learner development to be future ready in a rapidly changing environment. Goals can extend on helping define how we measure success.
I'm thinking about, I feel like I'm running a mission. I feel
Mission.
and I'm thinking about, so what does that really mean? And it could be part of our role could be showing examples of how the portrait actually is being used to benefit districts without saying you have to do X, Y, and Z. We're simply providing the guidance so districts can understand how they can take ideas and implement it based off what they need. I feel like, when you look at those competencies on the portrait, fundamentally, we will have to answer some questions on how do you measure those? And that should be part of the assessment conversation that we talked about yesterday. And that's the good work. You heard from a vendor today who showed one example, but there are many ways to do that. But I do think traction will be gained if we can show how you actually use it, but not force the specific strategy that we're sharing, if that makes sense.
I think that makes perfect sense. Because I actually leaned over to RJ during that and I said, how are we ensuring that this is being done without dictating how it is being done? I think somehow in the goal, we need to represent that we're not telling you how to get there, but this is where you need to get to.
Well,
That wasn't very eloquent.
no, that's exactly right. I mean, okay, here's that North Star. Now, the way you get there is, but this is what we need so that our graduates are ready for their future.
I would say also remember if you go back to like fundamentally, I think the board needs to ask themselves, like, so what? You know what I mean? So what do we, what's the purpose of this? It outlines a lot of skills and competencies, but at the end of the day, and maybe this is a better statement, we're trying to get kids to care about what they're doing, right? Like they
Take ownership.
to take student agency. We say that word a lot, agency, but what we're trying to do is get kids to own their learning more so it's more relevant to their lives. So maybe the statement is the state school board supports, the portrait of a graduate that really, I mean, I'm just trying to think out loud, that pushes on student ownership, agency around whole learner development to be ready in the future, something like that. Because none of this means anything unless a kid owns it more, understands their place in society more.
It's true.
Understands why problem solving is important, or it becomes just a list of a checkoff. So
Scott, say that again. Whole learner. What was the rest
What
of
if-
that sentence?
What if they'll take the words from the profile, the learn, work, contribute, and thrive? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
With the sentence that you just said.
yeah, like students, at the end of the day, our goal is students. I mean, the kernel of that is the truth. So what we're trying to do is, I just lost my train of thought. Classic mission work when you don't remember what you
Yes, right.
I was going to say, we need a recording.
Oh, what'd you just say? I have no idea. I'm being recorded. I don't know. Maybe we can go back.
I thought I had.
It was so the student, the whole student, agency.
It's agency ownership through whole learner student or whole learner development. I call student learner, whole learner development.
Okay.
Could you say student centered?
Yep, student centered. All the portrait pushes on students owning their learning, students having more agency and control and choice over their learning to be more applicable to their lives. I think these are all just key phrases we can, that's the point. So if I'm doing a project-based learning project, or I'm doing a community internship, you're learning those skills through the programs that are happening throughout our state right now. What we're just trying to do is quantify and elevate human skills and balance it with our traditional measurements. So I'm thinking, I do think we need to put something in there around, I think it's already on the portrait, that being future ready. I like that phrase because it is very difficult to say what our kids are going to need even in 5 years with what's happening with technology. So I don't know how to phrase that, but I think it'd be a nice statement to give us. It's an open statement that doesn't box us in either.
So at the bottom of the profile of the graduate is the fine print. The purpose of the profile is to articulate the knowledge, skills, and mindset students need to thrive after graduation, establish a North Star for state and local policies, and create a strongly aligned educational system for Wyoming. I mean, isn't that our goal?
I was going to say that.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Pretty damn good. I was going to be the devil's advocate and say, okay,
That is the goal.
in the general population, how do people interpret agency? Because in hearing that, I can think of it a number of different ways. And so it's like, okay, what does agency really mean? What is it really driving at? More so than, is there a better word to put in its place? But that kind of supersedes right there. That pretty much takes care of the whole thing. A well-written statement.
Yeah, and the statement right above it, to kind of capture, Kristen, what you were talking about with all of the entities, it says the Wyoming Profile of a Graduate is an initiative led by the State Board of Education and developed in partnership with students, families, educators, community leaders, and employers from across Wyoming.
And we could even put the associations, the different associations that are involved with that too. Superintendents, principals, teacher groups, curriculum directors.
I like that. I like that phrase.
I think the biggest support of the whole thing is the fact that we have approximately 9,000 surveys and results that have been presented to us from the public saying, this is what our kids need. What better proof of something that we need to support as we move forward to echo the voice of our people of Wyoming. And at the same time, let's not get too complicated with it. Let's keep it simple so that my poor little farm vocabulary fits into it quite nicely. So.
I like that. Keep it simple.
You know, Scott, a question that I have is, think of your FFA kids and your Skill USA kids and the projects that they end up doing. And, you know, some of your FFA people pretty much take on a herd of sheep or a herd of cattle and some growth as far as acreage and all. Wouldn't that represent what we're trying to show for the future for these kids as well? As they're taking on something of interest to them that they're, I guess, initiating their ability to have total ownership in.
I would take it a step further. I would say this might be a little bold at this moment from the board lens, but what we're really talking about is quantifying learning in and out of the classroom.
Right.
Because that's a powerful statement when you think about, there'll be disagreements on that. But at the end, like you just brought up an example, RJ, another example is if I have 10 high school students walking across the street to tutor some kids over at Coulter Elementary for 2 days a week after school hours, that should count. That matches one of the competencies on the profile. So, or the portrait. And what we typically do is just add things to a kid's plate unless it happens between 8 and 4 o'clock and it doesn't count. I don't think you can do that in this world anymore. Everything is interconnected in and out of school. God, even our policies are. And yet one thing we still do is just quantify learning 8 to 4. So what I think what the portrait of a graduate allows for us is to have that conversation in and out of the classroom.
Good point.
And here's another, I'll just add on to that. If we don't do in and out of the classroom, and I'm not saying this board, but overall in general, kids are going to find it anyway. They're going to take a class through an independent provider. They're going to do an experience. It's everywhere now. Learning opportunities are just not in school. The proliferation of different learning opportunities is everywhere now. It's the a la carte era of education. So we've got to think about that as we move forward too.
But how do we write it as a goal?
So I'm looking this up kind of right now, that by such and such time, right? What is it? A purpose? Is it to promote? Is it to articulate? Is it to, in this language here, was to articulate the knowledge, skills, and mindsets that students needs after graduation. Let's see.
Go to AI.
We could just have Chat GPT. Here we go. Here we go. Are you ready? All right, run. Okay. There we go. Hold on, I've got to get.
While you're doing that, I
Yeah.
have a question.
Yeah.
Are we, is the goal of this to not only come up with a very broad, statewide goal? I mean, clearly this is a goal that would extend over a long period of time, right? And that we intend, as Bill said, that it would continue to have life over a long period of time. But are we also supposed to be coming up with a goal that is achievable in the next? I mean, I'm looking at our other goals that we have articulated in the last year, and those goals are more shorter term goals. Are we also supposed to be coming up with those sort of smarter goals, like Amy was saying?
I think that's what.
Underneath, or is that what they're doing? Okay.
I think they're doing those goals.
They were gonna go through this list.
Yeah, and we're just doing the holistic,
Okay.
I believe.
And I think the only reason we start on the profile as that holistic is that's where the board kind of sounded to go, is my take on it.
Lord, really, if I typed that fast, I'd have 500 errors. More like, let's see.
You didn't have Mr. Sather teaching you typing like I did in high school. Said you didn't have Mr. Sather teaching you typing like I did in high school.
I had Mrs. McKim and
Oh, really?
any English paper I gave to her, it looked like somebody died and bled on.
Well, a minute ago, when Scott was doing all his talking, I was thinking, what happened to shorthand? I wasn't somebody. For the shorthand.
Yeah.
We could have kept track of you then, Scott.
Well, heavens, we got a recorder right here.
There are many people on my board and my community wish that I would just be quiet sometimes.
Well, we don't.
We ready for it?
Yes.
Really? Yeah.
Okay, the Wyoming State Board of Education aims to establish the profile of a graduate as a guiding framework that articulates the essential skills, knowledge, and dispositions that every student should possess upon graduation. This profile will serve as a North Star for educational excellence and continuous improvement across the state by setting a clear vision of student outcomes that will inspire schools, educators, and communities to innovate and tailor their educational approaches to meet these goals. The board encourages local autonomy and creativity in achieving this vision, ensuring that each school can develop unique strategies that best meet the needs of their students while aligning with the overarching aspirations of a profile of a graduate.
Not bad.
He just did it in
Quickly.
Perfect.
I said, write a goal for the Wyoming State Board of Education to outline the purpose of the profile of a graduate that encompasses using the profile as a North Star, but does not dictate how schools will achieve this goal.
Well,
What I gave it, and that's what it gave me.
You might want to say that instead
I
of.
was over here thinking you whipped that out.
Isn't it ironic
No,
that was produced and what we're talking about for students in the future? I'll tell you, things are changing in K-12.
Yeah.
So,
And if you use them in a proper way, they are very useful.
Mhm.
It's hard to argue with that. What, 2 minutes?
Mhm.
Wow.
Actually well, it wrote it in about 30 seconds, but it took me longer to type in how I wanted it to.
Adjust the profile? I know, how did it have the background?
Because I put things in there like Wyoming State Board of Education and profile of a graduate, and because that's on the internet, it grabs from all of those things and it puts it together.
Frightening, isn't it, Bill?
I need to get out and herd some cows with you because we do a little simple thinking.
Yes. My problem is I have too much of that time, just the whole thing.
Well, I call it windshield time when you're driving somewhere. You do a lot of thinking in that time.
Yeah.
and to assist in doing their work.
Yeah.
Because they're great tools if they're done right. And,
Mhm.
you know, we gave some boundaries and how to utilize it. And so I think it's fabulous, the things it can do.
I use it for legal research. That Westlaw has an AI now.
It does.
Yes. And I wish they had it in 1993 when I started and I was trying to do Boolean word searches. Or Boolean, however you say that.
So now you can type in, I need a closing statement for this.
Probably, I haven't done that, but
And I want my personal feelings in this.
Do we really have to tell the rest of them you used AI, or can we just say we came up with it?
This is our starting point and
this is not what we want to set. This would be in violation of our school's policy.
I'm impressed, holy smokes.
Yeah.
It is a pretty cool.
A lot of school districts, I mean, they all have their own policies, but haven't they somewhat tried to embrace?
Yeah,
absolutely.
they train teachers and how can you, there's really great resources for like student outlines and then how they can take that. A lot of times students have trouble conquering the white of just a blank piece of paper. And so they can use it as a resource and a guide. And then, like you said, how to take things out so that it's their work and not ChatGPT's work. And then being really purposeful about when you're asking students to write things is the purpose to get them to write, this giant essay, right? That spans pages upon pages upon pages, or could you get their true writing without AI in just a paragraph? And so it's when to use it, how to use it, and to really be purposeful in the things that you're asking students to do. So yeah, we've already started training different.
Well, the other thing that I think is important for teachers is to tell students, I don't have any problem with you using it. But when I interview you or talk to you, you've got to be able to explain what you've written here. And if you can't, then it's not appropriate.
It's been so difficult to come up with policies with regards to that.
Sure.
I'm not sure that we have one that we're using that's a final product.
And I don't.
So hard because you do want kids to learn how to use it responsibly.
Well, if you try to fight it and say no way, you're gonna lose no matter what you do. So how do you embrace it and make it for the best use?
Yeah.
And thinking critically about what's accurate,
right?
What's not accurate,
right?
And how can we make it the best, product?
Yeah. Well,
and especially opinion writing things.
Oh.
And so you can get so many things to support one side of an opinion. And then oftentimes we've had a teacher in PC that flips it.
It's like, I know, right.
And now look at this, and now let's make an educated,
talking about
paper and almost using it as part of like the research gathering piece of it.
Wait till you hear.
You use the Lexus AI?
I was just telling Catherine, I use Westlaw. I use Westlaw.
Might be we actually disagree with on wrestling things, so when I get home, they're already gone.
Hopefully you don't have to write it.
Interesting, when they asked us, because it's down tomorrow, so it's gonna be.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I had agreed to coach my son's soccer team. I haven't been a coach for 14 years. So I asked Chat GPT to write soccer kind of practice plan or schedule for this. And these are the skills that I wanted to work on. And so it pulled it all together and I had
Without question.
I had my duration of, I think I said an hour and a half, and these are the age kids, and these are the skills that I want to work on.
It's giving it all the.
You can do it for lesson planning. Like you can take a lesson that you said, how can I integrate more movement into this lesson or more student autonomy or blah, blah, blah. Can you write me a lesson plan for that?
I wish I had that when I was
With it right
cooking
now.
Little League.
Mhm.
That would have been.
I know.
great.
I know, my hot for my hot food is like.
My son was reading Romeo and Juliet Shakespeare, and then he was having friends of his do the play on the recess playground, and he was writing his own script. And so I was like, well, I'll help him out. And I had Chat GBT write a 15-minute Romeo and Juliet script, and I gave it to him. He goes, thanks, Mom, but I like mine better. I said, perfect, bud. Perfect. But yeah, it's easy.
We'll get started as soon as RJ comes back.
Hey, Bill?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you should.
I think we're all here. Diana, go ahead.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, would you like to take a few minutes and hear from each group and know that these are draft pieces, and then we can take them, get things kind of closer to a formal version and bring them back to you at your next meeting. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Which group would you like to hear from first?
I want Amy to go first. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
We're kind of proud of ourselves, if you guys didn't notice.
All right, so here is our first take at the goal. The Wyoming State Board of Education aims to establish the profile of a graduate as a guiding framework that articulates the essential skills, knowledge, and dispositions that every student should possess upon graduation. This profile will serve as a North Star for educational excellence and continuous improvement across the state. By setting a clear vision of student outcomes, it will inspire schools, educators, and communities to innovate and tailor their educational approaches to meet these goals. The board encourages local autonomy and creativity in achieving this vision, ensuring that each school can develop unique strategies that best meet the needs of their students while aligning with the overarching aspirations of the profile of a graduate. Now, shall we be honest?
No.
Okay.
Wait. Are we going? I think we need to.
So with the help of AI, we wrote this particular piece. Yeah, it was, so that was the goal that we came up with ChatGPT.
But Amy had the Amy had the intelligence to know what to put in the computer to get it.
It will ask you more questions it will refine your search for you.
Yeah.
Just tell them what you can do.
So this is what, this is what I put in. I said, write a goal for the Wyoming State Board of Education to outline the purpose of the profile of a graduate that will encompass using the profile as a North Star, but does not dictate how schools will achieve the goal. So.
I love it.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just a technical thing. Again, really pushing on that idea that we are fulfilling our statutory obligation of setting a goal So I'm wondering about like a little preamble that says pursuant to 21 dash blah, blah, blah. The board hereby establishes a goal for the state of Wyoming as, and then
Do you want me to email this to you? Yes.
just tell ChatGPT to email it to you.
All right, your other group, whoever's reporting.
That would be me. Okay, do you have your goals in front of you that are in your packet? Okay, because we messed with them a fair bit. We are conflating goal 1 into the value statement. So our most important, we felt like everything was covered in goal 1 except for the stakeholder piece. So we are asking Diana to just weave the stakeholder input into the value statement and then eliminating goal 1 as goal 1. Our new goal 1 is listed here as goal 2. It will now read, continue to work on the profile of a graduate in the school facilitation and communities working together to implement the profile locally. So basically, instead of complete the profile of a graduate toolkit, we've already done that. So now it's continuing the work of the facilitation in the districts. So keeping profile as our goal 1 in our, I'll talk about the goal thing in a second too. Goal number 2 is, hold on a minute. Goal number 2 is currently listed as goal 5. So we want that moved up. Priority number 2, adopt graduation standards. We also are proposing that we call these priorities instead of goals because you guys have the statewide goal and now we have priorities. So thank you. So, and then we won't say goal, we're gonna, so priority number 3 is currently listed as goal 4. It is now reading, continue to implement the development and review of state standards. Priority 4 is currently goal 6. Develop modifications, seek input, and implement the accountability system with recommendations for modifications or changes. Is that close, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
And hopefully Diana can work some.
Yeah. Goal 5 is, I'm sorry, priority 5 is currently goal 7. We're just changing one word, which is, we're going to change study to streamline because we've studied already. So now we want to streamline the components of the district and state assessment systems for alignment to current educational vision of the state and explore federal allowance for flexibilities. We have a new priority number 6. It is that we would like to begin a study, an in-depth study of the responsibilities of the State Board of Education regarding accreditation and the progress we might go through to explore our work on accreditation, because we haven't touched that. Priority number 7 and 8 are a split of what is currently goal 3. I might need some help on this one, but number 7, I believe, says continue to participate in board development, period. Number 8 would then say continue our role as the State Board of Career and Technical Education to support and enhance the efforts of our partners in the career and technical education fields in Wyoming. Okay, hold on. We have one more. I gotta find it. Oh, priority number 9. Continue to play our role in the future of learning partnership. Is that what it's called? Okay. I think that's it. Did I get it all?
You did.
And we didn't use ChatGPT. We use this.
Chat of all of us.
Yeah, just try this.
Lots of chatting.
So we, so just for clarity, we eliminated goal 8 altogether because we feel like we did, you guys did that. And we eliminated goal 1. So then we moved other things around for priorities.
I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just the issue of board development, we split that because we have an obligation to develop ourselves as a board. and that continues. And we wanted to emphasize the role that we play as CTE board and not lose sight of the important component that is in our obligation.
You have enough information.
I can send you my notes on that too. Mhm.
Okay. We're good, I think. If you're good, we're good.
Okay, action items. Wow.
So do we go to 5.2? Is that where we're at? Or did we?
No, we're on action items. We're ready.
Okay,
We're ready.
perfect.
Action.
We're ready for the action items. Look at there, 10:59. Wanda, did you want, because you and I talked, so we're juggling the
Absolutely.
agenda just for a second, but. it won't-
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give you an update on the Perkins 5 state plan. I believe you received an email, and if you recall, in April of 2024, the state board did approve the Perkins 5 state plan. From there, we sent it on to our federal partners, and they responded back to us. They liked all of the components until they got to the accountability for results. And in that section, they requested that we have the most current data. And at the time, if you recall, we went out for public comment in January of 2024. We had the most current data. But since that time, 6 months later, we have more current data. So they asked if we would go back, look at our indicators, and use the most current data. So we have data from 22, 23. And each of these different indicators, we look at graduation rate, we look at, and I just wanted to bring this up because as we were talking about the YTOP, the ELA is tested in 10th grade for our CTE students, in ELA, in math, and then in science. So we do count that, and that is included in Perkins. Along with that, we do a follow-up survey. We also look at industry recognized credentials. And you heard Dr. Fleechuk talk yesterday about the fact that really it's a celebration. We've included that in our accountability. And what we've noticed is that our students are taking much more effort to complete and successfully complete those industry recognized credentials. So over the past 3 years, we've seen it gone from about 1,700 students who received industry recognized credentials to over 3,000. So that is really a great effort. But what our federal partners said when they looked at the data is, gosh, you're doing so well on some of these indicators. We think that you need to raise the performance rate. And so they're pushing us to raise that higher. So those are some of the things that we'll be looking at is each of these indicators. We've also set initial percentage rates on each of those. We'll go out again for public comment because that's a requirement to have that out for 30 days. And then after those 30 days, we'll bring it back to the board again. So you'll have an opportunity to see what the public comment is around that. One last thing that I'd like you to consider, and we can bring this up at the time that we bring public comment back, is we could set those performance rates for 4 years and leave that static, or we could bring it back every year and have you look at those depending on how our data comes back and change those. So I don't know. It's in some ways there's a benefit to that too, because you can lower some of the goals too, in terms of, like, say our students don't do as well in math or in ELA. We want to be fluid in being able to adjust some of those things as well too. We don't want to rate that so high that we never can meet it. So I don't know, just some things to think about when we come back, whether we leave it for 4 years on the performance indicators or if it's something we want to change every year. So with that, any questions that I can further clarify?
Mr. Chair, do we have any issues with, do we have to formally vote again on it? And our next meeting is not till September, so is there a time issue?
I would defer to Wanda on the time.
Mr. Chairman, so what we do know is the federal partners will still give us access to the funds, so we'll be able to get those out to districts. We have to have everything completed by October. And we have set some preliminary data and shared it with them. They have preliminarily said that the data that we shared and the targeted percentages that we set, they're good with, but again, they want to see public comment.
And your first question is, yes, we'd have to vote on it again, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Helen.
I just had a quick question that actually made me think about the superintendent's memo yesterday that we talked about with the 9th and 10th grade math and ELA, 9th and 10th grade, just 9th grade, just 10th grade. You just said that that was one of your markers for your Perkins plan. So I guess I don't need to know the answer to that right now, but I guess I want to know whether, as we talk about more deep study of that question, if it's going to impact the Perkins plan. I think we would like to know that. So that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on the Perkins plan? Better check Scott. Didn't see anything. All right, let's move to the action items. The first one on the agenda is the policies in 4 and 5 on, and this will be our final reading if they are so approved. And can we have someone pull those up to make sure we have them?
Chairman Lambert, I'll make a motion to approve item 6.1 SB policies 4 and 5 for final reading.
Scott, let's do them individually.
Okay.
Because there's 2, correct? So let's do the section 4, the one I have in front. Is that what everybody has up? Is that where we're at? I can't read that up there. Board member resignation. Would that work, Scott, for your motion?
Absolutely. I'll redo it for clarity and for the minutes. I'll make a motion for approval on action items, SBE policies, section 4.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve SBE policy number 4 on final reading.
Mr. Chair, I make a movement to approve.
Hang on, Scott. Hang on just a second. Amy, do you have the motion maker in second?
Scott and Taylor?
Yep.
And we're seeing your
Okay.
screen. Just
Is there any discussion?
No,
It's okay. I didn't know.
I'm sorry.
You're okay. I just didn't.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, Scott, if you'd like to make your motion for the next one.
Sure. Mr. Chair, I make a motion for approval of section 6.1. Within that, section 5, removal draft.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve section 5, board member removal from office policy. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. So carried. And I do need to apologize because I think it's better to break those up, even though I think the motion was individually, and I should have caught that before, so I do apologize to everybody for that. So we will move to the district accreditation approvals. And I'd really like to have the list shared, the PDF file that we're gonna, as we look at those so that. And my other quick question is to the department is, that was open to the public to look at this PDF file in board docs. Is that correct? I meant to ask that before, Wanda, and I apologize, but I just,
Yes, this file has been posted.
okay,
So
perfect, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And I guess I need to remind those of you that need to recuse from certain districts.
What point do I do that? It's after the second.
Yeah, I think so. That's,
that right?
I think Catherine, yeah.
After this.
Mr. Chair, there are 4 motions here, 4 items. Do you want them all separate?
Yeah.
I think that would be beneficial if we would do that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that the recommended Wyoming school districts be accredited for the 24-25 school year
Mr. Chair, I would second that.
Can we say as listed?
as listed.
I would second that as listed.
Okay. It's been moved by Mark, seconded by Ellen to approve the, how many ever number there is of Wyoming school districts to be accredited for the 24-25 school year.
Mr. Chair, I need to recuse myself for Carbon County School District number 2.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I need to recuse myself from Teton County 1.
Mr. Chair, I need to recuse myself from Fremont County School District number 1.
Amy, are we doing all right? Or do we need to slow down? Could we have,
I have for Carbon 2, Scott, Teton 1, Taylor, Fremont 1.
And Amy, for Johnson County, number 1.
And Kristen for Bighorn County, number 4.
you don't have to have a quorum. Because they're just recusing for that district. So see,
I got him.
You got him?
I got him. I wrote him down.
what, Diana?
My apologies.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Just checking, because with your recusals, I'm not sure you have quorum, so.
But
we do for each of the other districts.
But see, they're just recusing for that district. So,
Right?
right?
Isn't that right?
That would be right,
I think
right,
that's
Catherine?
right, yeah.
Ellen and I were having that
We were
sidebar.
just talking about that. I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Hi.
But they're still voting on every other
every
district
other
but theirs, and there's only one abstaining from
each.
those districts, so. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's go to number 2.
Mr. Chairman, I move that that the recommended Wyoming school district be accredited with support for the 2024-2025 school year.
As listed.
As listed.
Is that okay? And the only reason I say that is just to make sure the public knows that we're looking at a list and it's very apparent what we're doing. So it's been moved and seconded to recommend the Wyoming School District be accredited with support for the 24-25 school year as listed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 3.
Mr. Chair, I move that the recommended Wyoming schools be accredited with support for the 2024-2025 school year as listed.
Second.
It's been moved by Amy, seconded by Joe to recommend the Wyoming schools be accredited with support for the 24-25 school year as listed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I move that the recommended Wyoming state-funded institutions be accredited for the 2024-25 school year as listed.
Second.
It's been moved by Ellen, seconded by Mark to approve the Wyoming state-funded institutions be accredited for the 24-25 school year as listed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I believe that's it, correct? Okay. And thanks to the department for putting all that together for us. Lori, we have you up. Do you need to explain anything or not on the timeline?
So that's the timeline I presented at the last meeting, so I'll stand for any questions.
Okay. And if we could, can we pull up the timeline on board docs? Can we do that or not? And if we could see, can we see the chart in there, chart? Yeah, go to the PDF. Because Lori, this is correct. This would what we would be approving is this chart, correct, for the timeline? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the standards review timeline for the next 10-year review cycle of the Wyoming content and performance standards.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Mark, seconded by RJ to approve the. What were your words again? Standard. It's probably written here somewhere. Standard review timeline for the next 10-year review cycle of the Wyoming content and performance standards. Is there any discussion?
I just want to say thank you, Lori and the department. This has been such a long time coming and this is just making my heart so warm. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Tentative approval of State Board 24-25 goals.
We now have two things.
Oh, okay.
And
Yes,
Mr.
we do.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just a reminder, we had put that in there in case you had them finalized, refined and polished. We can sure, if with your pleasure, table that and bring them back to you. So you have.
That would be good.
Yeah.
No, I think ours is perfect.
I prefer to table ours and. Just in case.
We'll do an intervention for group 2.
We get for not using AI.
All right. So we do approve the budget, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
this is
All right.
Dickie's ready.
Right. I will start by moving to approve the budget, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the fiscal year 25-26 budget. Is that
Okay. and
all
then-
right with the budget?
Yeah,
Or-
Mr. Chair,
budget.
I've got an
Budget.
amendment to propose
Yeah.
as well. Or you go, Ellen.
No, you amend it and then I'm going to have a discussion.
Okay. All right. Mr. Chair. Move to amend the proposed budget to move $25,000 into the 100 series general fund for board salaries from the in-state travel line item.
Second.
It's been moved by Dickie, seconded by Joe to amend our 25-26 budget by moving the $25,000 into the salaries. Is there any discussion on the amendments?
Amy has a question.
What are you pointing at?
Amy.
Oh,
It was the same.
Through the lines.
So we're just voting on
right.
Okay, so I move to amend the proposed budget to move 25,000 into the 100 series fund board salaries from in-state travel.
Yeah, it should be in your email from me as well.
Okay.
Yes, and that's correct.
That's perfect. Yeah, just-
Ellen.
So I have three things I just need to say under discussion for transparency. I appreciate the comments about the lack of transparency in that proposed budget. I will say that at every treasurer's report, you have the actual current amount of money. And so the public does know how much we are spending on board salaries. So I appreciate that comment, but it is transparent as to what we are spending. Point number two, in the prior budgets that Trent shared with me, we are well within a comfort zone to put $25,000 in there because each year since 2019, our board salaries have gone down significantly. So we're still okay at 25,000, but point number three, we are still unclear if the state budget department will restrict that 100 series. So we want to make sure that we keep it low for now. So those are my three comments. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any more comments on the amendment?
So the 25,000 is the low end of that in case it can't be moved. We still feel fine.
It's lower than the low end.
Oh, lower than the low end.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, we need to go back because I'm not, did we have a second on your original motion, Dickie?
Yeah.
Did we, Amy? I think
Joe.
Joe did.
Joe.
Okay. All right. So now we'll go back and vote on the budget as amended. Any discussion on the budget as amended?
Oh, so that was just a vote for to add the amendment?
Oh. That was the amendment.
Okay.
So now we're voting on the whole budget as amended.
Okay.
Any discussion on the budget as amended? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. Upcoming work meetings. I know every committee is awesomely working, so I can't keep track of all your schedules, so I don't know that.
Special meeting.
We'll work on that, yes. I do think Alan just brought up, I think we will try to put together something for a special meeting, but I don't think we're at the point where we want to try to come up with a date right now. So.
Better answer it.
So before we go to the public comments, is there anything that the board thinks we need to have a quick discussion about before we close?
Oh, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. Lori, did you have some clarifications you wanted to ask the board? If that's okay with you, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we talked about that.
Okay, yeah.
I just didn't have it written down. Our homework.
Mr. Chair, one question I have, if we have an opportunity.
You bet, Scott.
I don't see it on the agenda. Maybe I'm just clicking on the wrong spot, but I know we looked at our calendar starting for next year. I don't know if that's been discussed or finalized or anything like that, or if we just need more time.
Scott, Diana and I did not get to that for whatever reason. And I joked earlier in the meeting because she went on vacation and I did too, but her vacation was different than my vacation. So we apologize. We'll get that to the board as soon as we can so we can get it finalized because we do apologize, or I do.
That's fine.
It just got lost in the shuffle.
But this is not our last meeting forever. Not our last meeting.
No, we are going to have more meetings. So yeah.
All right.
I have
Thank you.
to take full responsibility, Scott.
All right. It's all right. The year book's quick. So whatever, I'm happy to help with that too.
It honestly, in my world, it seemed like we just met and now we're at the retreat already. And I know there was quite a bit of time between, but it didn't feel like it. It just felt like it was here. So go ahead, Lori. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to get that loaded back up there. Google was acting funny for a sec. Just in the conversations that I've heard the last couple of days, there are a couple of clarifications I wanted to make so that we're understanding as we're kind of going forward with some assessment, and then just see if there's any additional questions or information you want me to bring at future meetings. I did want to say with the grade 9, 10, and that was reemphasized today with Ms. Krager with the if we were to remove the assessment in the grade 9, that would have an impact to the Perkins grant, and that would be something to consider. There'd also be a consideration of if we were assessing that grade band high school at the lowest level, that might be something else to think about. And why some of what we heard in the listening sessions was grade 10 might be more preferred. And then with practice, the tools, I heard a comment about that kids don't have the opportunity to practice with the tools that they're using on the assessment. Just want to remind the board that you do have the practice test that you've been given as well, and that students are, teachers are encouraged to let their students practice those tools on the practice test, as well as they have those same tools in the authoring tool tests and the modulars and the interims. And yes.
Mr. Chair. Okay. I think the suggestion was during the test, if they didn't understand how to use the tool, that if there was the option of having some sort of tutorial that could go with that, because that's when the panic ensues, even if they've done all the modulars and they've taken the practice and they've done all the interim assessments, and they're getting to the test and they're having to manipulate something and they have the right answer on their paper, but they either don't know how to enter it, or they don't know how to manipulate the particular tool that's there. If there's a tutorial that could help them while they're taking that final assessment.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Pearson, thank you. That helps to clarify. I think there's some, I'm not sure the extent to all the tools, so we will bring that information back later when we know more. And then with the EL, the English language learners exemption that was talked about yesterday, just to note that we do include those exemptions on the first year of the YTOP ELA. It doesn't exempt them from the English language proficiency assessment that we use, but it does exempt them from that first year that they're in the schools on the ELA YTOP test. They still are required to take the math and the science. So I wanted to clarify that. And I think that was the main parts. And then just to reemphasize, a lot of the discussion with assessments in general, there's a blurred line between what instructionally relevant assessments in the district level versus the state assessment system. And I just wanted to kind of clarify that line. So with the state assessment, we're really focusing on looking at the programs across the state and ensuring that alignment. And so the assessment has to focus solely on the state standards that are approved by this group. And we'll be bringing forward in the next couple of months those new blueprints to look at. But I just heard a lot of the crossing over of that line, and I wanted to make sure it was pretty clear that that state test does look quite a bit smaller, fine grain of what the intention is compared to what maybe some of the hopes and dreams of opening that up with what's available at the district level more easily. So I see a couple of questioning looks. I want to make sure I'm clearly saying that. Yes. Okay, so our state tests, we're really focusing on assessing those state standards and ensuring that students are learning on those standards across the schools, and it's a program check. So our accountability is set up to have that school performance report to say, are our schools actually doing that? Are they delivering instruction and learning that meets those standards? And at a program level, we're giving those results. Sometimes some of the comments I'm hearing are wanting those results to give you more and more and more detail of what each student is doing. And so I just want to remind, it's a moment in time. It's a single data point out of many data points. And that at the local level, there's much more information in those data points that are given there relevant to the instructional program in the school. Does that clarify? Yes.
I have a total squirrel. Yesterday we talked, you provided, somehow we had a conversation about the visual and hearing impaired services and the extended standards in the YALT and that whole package. And you said something like, if you would like to see the numbers around the proportion of students in special needs versus regional. I would like to see that. So I just wrote that down. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Chair, different topic, but it's germane to Lori's work. And I know we've had some off mic comments about this, but we had intended with our subcommittee to bring forward the ELA guidance that Lori's ELA teachers would be using this summer. And so we've seen it in subcommittee. We have the document. We just didn't bring it forward. So my suggestion, Mr. Chair, is that Diana send this out to all of you and ask you to comment on it in the next few days, weeks.
Yes. Well,
And then we can get it to Lori so she can use it for her group, and Dr. Amy also sits on that committee, so that will work out.
And I may have, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll also put that calendar with that. So watch for a follow-up email from me from the retreat, if you would. One of the things that please remember, don't do a reply all, because you don't want to start a discussion or anything that might be misconstrued as a meeting. So if you reply to Bill, he can distribute to whoever he needs to, maybe, as would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and when we have that, I mean, pick up the phone if you need to, you know, just because I don't want to be in court. And I don't want the state board to be in court is more appropriate way to put that. So. Okay, anything else for Lori, or Lori, do you have more? I see you're still looking, so.
I did, Mr. Chairman, I did get a response from somebody on my team about the tools. I just wanted to make sure I have that. So there is a tutorial for every question and the video tutorial for every item on the test that's available as they are taking that test. It instructs them with a video on how to answer that type of item, but it does. So it might just be a matter of going in the practice test and seeing where the play button is for that item or that tutorial. And there's more being written, but I think that that helps to answer it.
Okay. Any other questions for Lori then?
It's in the settings dropdown with the strike through and the TTS section.
So really easy for kids to find. Sorry.
We have to strike a really good balance too about not having too much in front of them. If it's unnecessary for them, it can be distracting. So it is a very challenging thing to say what goes in front of everybody versus what's going to need to be instructionally, you know, teach them where to find that if they need it.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Lori. And I should have brought this up during action items because I don't know whether all of you read, but we did get an email from a board member, and you know, I think I just need to say as the board chairman anyway, that we're not in any position to make any recommendations on the presentation that was earlier today. And so that's just, you know, we took it as advisement, but there's no action intended at this time. So, right. So with that, do we have any public comments? None? Board member comments? Ellen?
I just wanted to thank everybody. Thank you to Amy and Linda and Wanda for setting us up and the lovely gift bags. To Weston One for their amazing hospitality. To Chair Lambert for setting up that amazing dinner last night. It was lovely. You were so stressed about it and it was just perfect. The setting was beautiful. Dinner was lovely. It was lovely. And Diana, thank you. You, because of your organization, we are productive. Thank you.
Yes. Taylor?
Mr. Chair, and addition to what Ellen said, I won't repeat everyone, a ditto to that. I just also want to thank the board. I mean, I think we worked really hard the last couple of days. We came in with a lot of different ideas and there was a lot of good dialogue. And I just think it was a very productive meeting. So thanks to you all and thanks to all the support staff and the WDE and everyone else. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Taylor.
I have a comment.
Mark.
Mr. Chair, I also echo the sentiments. Special shout out to Catherine for the research you did going all the way back to 1919. That was the year my father was born, so that was kind of a fun thought. And really also I was having breakfast this morning with a fellow educator, and I comment about how productive this board is in terms of rolling up its sleeves and saying, let's get some work done, and giving Diana some direction. And so just a thank you to all of us for the continued serious conversation about the value of kids and trying to do the right thing for students. So just very much appreciate that. And of course, Diana, my unending gratitude for you and all the work you do with everybody in this room. Thank you.
RJ.
I got to keep up with Mark. It's just the way it goes. No, I feel so honored to be part of this group. The focus is right. The energy and all is right. The time is right for what we're doing, and we're really doing great things for kids, and that's so rewarding. It's the easiest board I've been on to work with by far, and such great people, even though Amy gives me a hard time all the time. I want to thank WDE people for the gifts. That was awful sweet of you guys, and I don't want you to get a big head, but you really stepped out of your way with the dinner last night and all. That was very, very nice place and great people. And Diane, you're remarkable. You already know that, but by golly, you can call on her anytime and she's just unbelievable. And I've known you for a long time and known that it'd always be the case, but you really make a difference for us and for state of Wyoming. And I really appreciate that. And even though I give you a hard time, you do a nice job of research there, girl. That was very interesting. So, and I'm not even going to address the two in the back because they're troublemakers anyway. So, but we've done some great stuff. We've got a lot to do, but it's in the right direction and our hearts are in the right place. And it's just really great to be part of them. So thank you for everything all of you do. You are making a difference.
Thanks, RJ. Anything, Amy? Nope. Kristen?
Ditto to what everybody else said. Thank you.
Dickie?
Yeah.
We got to keep Amy here until noon.
I know, that's what I keep thinking.
I said our goal is to keep her here until 5 after.
And first of all, I am going to give you food for thought, but I just want to thank all of you because you make sitting in this chair very easy, and that's what I like. And what I do like is when I do screw up, nobody snaps at me or gets mad, or everybody just kind of. And you can all take jokes once in a while, and I hope I don't go too far with that sometimes, but sometimes they just come out without my thought. So, it's not like I really think of these things, but
the dirty boots.
Yeah, the dirty boots one is unique, and my next one's going to be unique too, because I don't know how many years ago I sat in this room and a really, really good board member made a comment about a sheep herder, and it turned out to be his granddad's, and he took a lot of heat for that. So my comment is about cows and tying it to what we're doing. And so please don't take offense to it. But, we buy thousands of dollars worth of bulls anymore. It's nothing to average $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a bull. And if any of you are in that world, the data you get now will stretch across this room. They keep track of estimated progeny differences, EPDs for every trait under God's green earth. But what they've done is they've focused so much on certain traits. And so then I tie that into what we're assessing. We have to make sure we're assessing the right thing. Because last year I bought 8 bulls from a breeder, averaged $7,500. I got 2 of them left. Their structure is terrible. And I'm not comparing people to, but I'm saying, as we think of the assessment and the accountability, we got to focus on what's important and not get into just more computer data stuff that means nothing. So I hope that analogy is relevant. It is in my world, because I really thought about it until I was driving down this morning. So anyway, it's been a really focal point. I mean, we have bulls that have 0 structure now, guys. And yet they have these fantastic feed efficiencies and they have fantastic marbling, but that does my operation 0 good if a cow can't walk to the forest and raise a calf. So, you know, and I know it's a bad analogy, so I do apologize, but that's my world I live in. So with that, I don't have any more. Thanks for putting up with me. Any other comments?
It's a lot of bull.
I knew that was coming.
But it's not the stuff that was on my boots last night. All right, anything else needs to come before the board? Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Amy.